Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the day 4 of workshop number 1. We are happy that we have done 3 days, and I think the deliberations have been extremely rich. We've had the best of speakers, the diversity of the topics covered, the content, the depth of the understanding, and also the cross cutting nature of interactions. So, today we will start with a very, very important presentation on sediment transport. Our research fellow Rishika would be making that presentation. After that, we will have Captain Sudhir Subedar. I would like the participants to also look at the connections of the various lectures and various presentations that we have planned. So, Captain Subedar will be talking about the Brahmaputra and the entire inland water transport management. He has been involved in this very, very deeply. In fact, he has been a part of the committee that drafted the act for the National Waterway number 2, and somebody who has been part of the entire policy making. He was a seafarer for a long time, and then he served at a very senior level at the DG Shipping, and then he was at the IMO. So, Rishika, for you, it will be a very good interaction. He will be joining us shortly, but your presentation will be a good start for the day. And then we'll have Captain Subedar talking to us. And post lunch, we have a very special guest today, Ambassador Javed Ashraf. So that kind of connects us to the SAGAR vision in a very, very strong manner. He has been instrumental in the initial conceptualization of the SAGAR vision. And after Ambassador Ashraf, we'll be having a little more discussion and also a project presentation. So over to you, Rishika. Please introduce yourself and then make your presentation.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Rishika Khanna, and I'm doing a fellowship on understanding sediment transport in tropical waters. And today I will be giving you some insights based on this. So, understanding sediment transport in tropical waters. The topics which I would be covering in my presentation is what is sediment transport study and why do we need to study it in tropical waters? What is the process of sediment transport? The importance and consequence of sediment transport in our waters. What are the technological interventions which are developed and which can be used in sediment transport studies? The pathways of sediment transport studies which we are pursuing in at MRC in tropical waters, and the skill development in sediment transport. So, sediment transport, it is a mechanism by which the coastal erosion proceeds, and it impacts the dynamics of water zones such as coastal rivers, um estuaries, and waterway navigation channels and harbor capabilities, as well as it affects the water quality and related issues such as aquaculture. Uh, as many of you would be knowing, there are already many scientific studies going in Western and Nordic countries, but they are not curated for for our tropical waters. So, applying these frameworks directly from other parts of the world to our tropical waters is not a solution because our tropical waters have a very unique climatic conditions, sediment composition, aquatic ecosystem, and socioeconomic conditions, as well as taking into account our stakeholders' perspectives becomes important. So, our tropical waters need a targeted approach on several issues, such as marine traffic, waterway navigation, as well as shoreline vulnerability. The technological revolution provides us with very large variety of low cost tools as well for our in situ studies like sensors and gliders, which I will be covering, as well as sensing the satellite data, the open source modeling frameworks. All of this makes it easier for us to carry sediment transport monitoring in situ and management system, benefiting the tropical countries at a global level. So I would start what covers the process of sediment transport. There are three aspects. First, what the forces which initiate the sediment transport system, the significance of grain size in sediment transport, and how the movement of sediment transport takes place. So the energy input for initiating sediment transport is given by tides, waves, winds, and currents on the beaches and ports, inducing the coastal erosion, sediment transport, and accretion. So naturally, five different categories of initiating forces are there: water level changes, tides, waves, currents, and stream outflow. I will go through each of them one by one. Sea level changes result in emergence and submergence of coastlines, which start erosion and hence sediment transportation. The second category, tides. Tides are the oscillations of ocean waves, uh, ocean waters due to gravitational forces exerted by sea and the moon upon the oceans. So they move enormous amount of water 4 times a day and hence are capable of erosion. So they play an important role in nearshore dynamics. The third category, waves, are mostly created by winds, and the wave energy is generally dissipated in shallow waters by frictional interaction with seabed. The currents are created when wind blows over water surface, producing stress on the water particles at the surface and causing their movement in the direction of the wind. The last category, streams, are important for providing sediments and building depositional features like deltas. Now we've come to the significance of grain size. Broadly, there are two types of grains, cohesive and non-cohesive. So cohesive sediments mainly contain mud or clay, and they have particle sizes less than 4 micrometer in diameter. While the non-cohesive sediments, they contains sand and gravel, and their particle sizes are usually greater than 64 micrometer in diameter. And the interaction of these two different types of grains amongst themselves differ largely. So hence the separate study is required. The cohesive sediments have a special features of aggregating together to form flocks of sizes generally in the range of 100 to 200 micrometer, and the process is termed as flocculation. The flocculation causes the sediments to settle faster on the bottom of the sea. To measure the flocculation, there is a term called suspended sediment concentration (SSC), which determines the formation of the flocks. And in highly turbid water, the value of SSC is generally greater than zero point 0.5 gram per liter, and it the val- this high amount of value uh, pe- inhibits the light penetration and production of the phytoplankton, and it this makes the production of flocculation scarce, but they're abundant in less turbid water which have SSC less than zero point 0.1 gram per liter. Moving on to the movement of sediments. Sediments generally move either as bed load or or suspended load. So bed load consists of coarser grain particles like sand or gravel, that is which belong to the non-cohesive category, and they while moving, they move via rolling or sliding, remaining in continuous contact with bed while they jump along the bed in a series of low trajectories. The suspended loads they generally consist of finer grain particles like clay or silt, and they continuously flow in the water column without touching the bottom. So they are generally carried by turbulence. Now, what causes the movement of the sediments? So, the main cause is when the frictional force between the flowing water and the seabed generates sufficient shear stress to overcome both the gravitational force as well as the friction between the sediment grains and the underlying bed. This shear stress is largely dependent upon the average current speed. The direction, moving on to the direction of the movement, the, generally the direction of net coastal sediment transport is perpendicular to the shore. Now we move on to the importance and consequences of sediment transport. So, sediment transport and deposition are a lifeline for many ecosystems, either directly or indirectly. So, it builds the aquatic habitats for spawning and benthic organisms, and they are essential. The sediment transport patterns are essential for replenishing the nutrients to aquatic plants and vegetation in near shore systems. And the sediment transported from watersheds to the downstream is deposited in deltas and mudflats. So this helps in maintaining wetlands, protecting against coastal erosion, as well as effects of sea level rise. However, a perfect balance of the sediment transport and deposition cycle is essential, because even a slight diversion from equilibrium rate can cause ecosystem and safety issues. For example, too much sediment is responsible for water contamination, excessive algal blooms, and blockage of waterways, or altering their direction. The sediment can the deposition of sediments, a large amount of sediments can disrupt the aquatic migration cycles and harm the organs and gills of aquatic animals. And oxygen levels also fall when water temperature rise due to increasing sediment level, because sediments are generally absorb more heat than water. So to keep in check the sediment balance levels, there is a uh, there is a measurable unit given by total maximum daily load (TMDL), which establishes the limit of the measurable pollutants and parameters for a water body. Now, the technological interventions we have in sediment transportation studies. As I mentioned before, the bed load transport, the shear stress is proportional to the average current velocity, and the bed load transport rate is also proportional to the shear velocity, specifically shear velocity cube. So, to to measure this the sediment load, the suspended and the bed load sediment load, we need average current velocity as a parameter, as a measurement parameter, and sediment concentration to get the bed load as well as a suspended load. For this, we have firstly we have our acoustic Doppler current profiler, which is an instrument which measures both the quantities, that is the average current velocity as well as the sediment concentration from a vessel underway. The the direction of the sediment transport is generally detected by either geomorphic indicators or or by tracking the movement through artificial tracers. The places of wave convergence and divergence, which provides the quantitative measurements of how much littoral drift and the direction of the littoral drift in local as well as regional areas, is given by wave refraction studies. There are also other sedimentological methods such as beach profiling and sediment budget, which analyze the sediment transport. This sediment traps study specifically is employed to measure the quantity of suspended sediment which sink in an aquatic system at a given place over a period of time. Now we move on to the some successful a successful case of sediment management, which is the Mekong River Commission in China. They have a discharge and sediment monitoring program called DSMP, which measures weekly, monthly, and daily data of sediment transport in the river, recording of daily water levels, and all of their databases are available freely online on their website. Why do we need to take inspiration from this commission? Because the water system of Mekong River very closely resembles the tropical water system of India, and they can provide some useful insights on how to go towards a successful sediment management program. Now we are studying three different pathways in at MRC, that is river, coastal, and port systems. So I will go through why do we need three different pathways. A first reason is for effective resource management because each of these systems have each of these systems are very critical as they have high siltation rates, and these three systems have different siltation types. So in each of them, desiltation efforts requires precise information on sediment deposition type, and studying them separately will help in effective resource management and development of by developing separate monitoring systems, prediction tool, and intervention strategies. So, we study these three different pathways through three different demographically important case studies, which addresses the diversity as well as the similarities of the systems, and our end deliverables or the end goals of studying these case studies are uh, developing a policy and technology interventions, and developing modules for acoustic capacity and capability building. So first, in the case studies is the tropical river system of Brahmaputra. It has a it has higher siltation rates than other Himalayan rivers, and origin of 80% of sediments in our tropical waters is from higher Himalayas. The Himalayas have rugged terrain, fragile geology, and uneven, intense rainfall, and supraglacial debris, which are the main cause of development of the sediments. The problems which arose from the high sediment siltation rates are the riverbank erosion, river channel blockages, damages of turbines, degradation of water quality, and disturbance of riverine ecosystem. So why we have chosen Brahmaputra specifically? Because the sediment transport load is relatively higher in Brahmaputra, which approximates to 721 metric ton per year as compared to other Himalayan rivers like Ganga. And Brahmaputra flows through three different countries, so making it of national importance and crucial in maintaining our international relations as well. And Brahmaputra is highly dynamic in nature, and the region surrounding it contains dense and largely poor population, so making it the center of economic development. Our case studies for coastal systems are Konkan coast and the JNPT port which lies on it. So the geographical features are that they have rugged terrain with many seasonal rivers which drain the coast. So they carry high silt loads, especially in monsoon, and they are typically marked by sea cliffs, dunes, caves, and shore platforms, which are important sedimentological features. Now, the disadvantage or the problems which high level sediment transport poses in the coastal system are the severe coastal erosion due to uh, due to shifting sediment transport patterns and obstruction of waterways and port channels due to siltation and ineffectiveness of sonar uh, for sensing in the tropical waters. So, why we have chosen Konkan system specifically? Konkan region has a 500-kilometer long coastline, so it covers the economically important areas of Goa and Maharashtra. And JNPT port, that is Jawaharlal Nehru Port, which lies on the Konkan coast, is one of the country's largest container ports and handles significant part of country sea trade. And the studies of the Konkan coast form a prerequisite in coastal projects like ports and harbors, fisheries, and coastal protection, as well as land reclamation. Now, what is the way towards the skill development in our sediment transport system? For the first step towards it will be categorizing the different skilling levels as per the requirements of the industries. That is from the level of people who are on ground handling the equipments to the uh, people who are people who are sitting in the offices and uh, logging the data into the systems, and then building modules, different skilling modules at for each of the levels. The third step is identifying the stakeholders, who will be responsible for implementation of these skilling modules. And the skilling modules which we will develop will be delivered as short-term and long-term courses, as well as the supplementary to maritime courses. And as the dredging forms an important sector in sediment uh, transport system, the training and education in dredging and other desiltation industries will also become crucial. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Rishika. Any questions? Anybody? Please.
Sir, my doubt is like there is building of dams on the rivers. So, like on downstream, there is a lot of sediments coming and settling at the bottom of the dams. So, the rivers or the villages downstream lack fertility. So, is there any way that, or is there any initiative by government, or is there any technology intervention to continue that, what we can say, the flow of the sedimentation?
Yep. That's a very good question. Yes, today the technology allows us to have run of the river dams. So it doesn't stop the flow completely. I mean, the dams have gates at the bottom, and we have been able to go very, very low because the construction technology has improved. Because you can imagine to have an opening at the bottom. I mean, opening means it will be closed, but at times it can be opened so that we can allow the sediment to flow at certain intervals. But so the technology today has improved significantly. Even China is building run of the river dams, but what happens to the existing dams is a question, right?
Right.
So technology has definitely improved significantly, but also, when we talk about dams, there is always a debate whether dams really serve the purpose or not, or see, finally, everything is a compromise. For a decision maker or a policy maker, they have to look at multiple aspects and then come to a decision, which is it can't be a win-win for all. There will always be winners and losers in any decision that you take. But always, for a policy maker, the effort is to minimize the number of losers.
Right.
I mean, when I say loser, now anything you do, it's people, economy, nature, right?
Right.
Now you need to balance it. When I say people, people have aspirations, people have requirements. Development, is very important. Then economy, of course, what is you can. Economy is much easier to because it's numbers.
Right, sir.
How much benefit you have. But the third thing is nature. Environmentally, what will be the impact in the long term? So, as far as a policymaker is concerned, he has to balance between the three of them. So, the best policymaker would be one who can minimize the losers in this case. But even when you say people, there are so many different communities.
Right, sir.
Like when you say people, there is a lot of corporates, who would like development to happen, and if somebody is going to invest money and he has to get his return on investment. That's a community.
Right.
Corporates who want to. I mean, there is nothing wrong with that, because unless there is development, how will there'll be enough resources to take things forward? That is one. But what happens to the local community there? There'll be people who will be displaced. There'll be people, for whom the complete, it's a change of their life. If, communities are very, very deeply rooted to the local ecosystem. Now, when you build dams, so many people get displaced. So what happens to them? And I firmly believe it's a myth that they can be rehabilitated. It is just not possible. I mean, I heard some of the NGOs talking about the Steri Dam when it was built. So many people, so many of them were even given some land and houses in Delhi, around outside outskirts of Delhi. But you imagine a person who has been a gatherer in the hills. How will he adjust to the local condition here.
Right, sir.
So some of them actually go back. They can't live in a city. They can't. I mean, see, they can't even adapt to a new city, a new environment, right?
Right.
So many of them go back, and then there is nothing there to go back. So they somehow lose everything to say so. So that is the thing. So technology is always an enabler. There is these kind of now there's a lot of development that has happened, but you can't really replace the older ones which are there. And secondly, when you build a dam, the ecosystem gets completely like, see, there are so many species. I mean, you'll find presentations in this or even next workshop that they migrate, right? There are so many fish species or so many underwater species that migrate from the sea to the almost upstream, right up to the top. What happens to them? So in the West now, in the US, they have started demolishing dams. See, development is also a cycle.
Right, sir.
You reach a level and then you find that all this is not good for you. So in US there is a strong movement, and not just a movement, the government has realized, and they have not only stopped building new dams, they have also started demolishing older dams, because it ruins the ecosystem completely.
Right, sir.
So then, I mean, there was a flowing river festival which I was a part of in Bangalore sometime a few years back, and the concept was very nice. It's we run a movie on water. I mean, the name of the festival was Moving Water Film Festival. So there was a different. So there are different aspects. I was called for underwater noise. So there's a nice movie somebody has made. So they play the movie, and then they ask one of either somebody who has created the movie or somebody who's an expert on the subject, something like that. They get somebody to answer audience questions. So in that, one of the movies was Small Dams, Big Problems. Many people say, big dams have this problem, so we'll make small dams. But small dams have equal amount of problems. So small dams mean you'll have to build multiple of them, right? And there are certain rules. And see, dams can be built only at a certain height. So when you talk about the run of the river, on the upstream, only dams will work because dam has a purpose. Either it is for hydropower or it is for storage, right? So, but when you do these interventions, see, moment you start, as yesterday Ambassador Mudgal sir was also repeatedly saying, you should minimize interventions. As humans, we think that intervention is good, but it's not. I mean, nature has its own way of doing certain things, and if we intervene too much, then we'll create problems. So it's a larger debate. I mean, I am not here to take a position this way or that way. We would like to present all the scenarios, and at some point, the policymakers should be well informed when they take a decision.
Right, sir.
And that is how countries are run, or global policy is driven. They should have. So our aim is, when we say underwater domain awareness, our main objective and focus is that we must generate enough information which is useful, which is more focused, not generic information that everybody knows. But I mean, you can see this presentation, it brings a very different aspect to it. Right. Now, after this, you will have another presentation by. So there are so many things like now dredging. Yesterday, even Radhika ma'am had been talking about, dredging and how it can do. I mean, that's from a perspective of traditional knowledge. Right? So we are looking at multiple aspects. The whole idea of this workshop is to present to the audience policy making is a very complex and a very responsible, uh, uh, kind of process. So, but do we have time for so much to wait for so much information to come in? So that's, or the patience, or is it possible for one person or a group of person to have a bandwidth across so many dimensions? I mean, you look at last 3 days, we've had so many different people. I mean, somebody from diplomacy, somebody from research, somebody from, politics and economics, and somebody from a history background, somebody who's been part of the corporate but has seen things. So they all have a very different perspective. Finally, you have to balance it. When I say people, nature, economy and nature, it has to be a balance of all of it. I mean, there is a very solid example I saw. There's a movie, I mean, a small clip that was made, some 40, 50 years when washing machine came in the West, in the US. So somebody was trying to market that, right? So he said, I don't have money. The buyer says, I don't have money. No, no, we'll give you loan. So then this gentleman says that, till now I was working for myself. From now on, I'll work for you. You'll not get money just like that. No, if you take loan, you have to not only work to satisfy your own requirements, but you have to also work to satisfy the EMI that you have to pay, right? So then it's a never ending story. So that is what we are doing now with the nature also. There are certain things which we don't need. We have changed our lifestyle completely. I mean, like yesterday, Mr. Mudgal gave this example of, in the West, in certain areas, the temperature in the winters, temperature can go up to minus 20. But as a human, we need at least 15 degrees, 15 to 20 degrees plus to survive, right? Now, today people think that we will do heating. Heating means what? You have to consume so much energy. Now that energy is not going to come from nowhere, no? So now that energy, to produce that energy, you'll do something else. So it's a cycle, which could have been avoided. But earlier people had natural ways of, heating. But those traditional knowledge has been completely removed and we are finding so-called solutions, which is going to put you in more trouble. So that holistic perspective is lost.
Right, sir.
To solve one problem, you have created many more other problems. And then you sit in a big table and say that we need to now, you created climate change. You are responsible. Now so that is another thing which, some of the speakers were also trying to highlight, that people create problems to keep an industry alive. So, I mean, I don't want to disappoint the young generation, but, we have to be very careful about what we are doing, where we are heading. Finally, whatever is happening next, your generation has to take over all this.
Right.
So, if something is not right, then it is your responsibility to correct it. And the whole idea is that you don't get carried away with what is happening. I mean, what has been happening for 100 years doesn't mean it is right. We should always question it and see whether it is. And it's not about that people who did it were wrong. But with your generation, you should see that is it relevant to my times today? See, the whole times also change, right? I mean, the whole ecosystem is changing. So in the new context, is it valid? So that has to be done. And the purpose of a workshop like this is to give you different dimensions. I mean, now what Rishika is trying to do is bring the technology perspective and also how technology can help policy making. See, data analytics is very, very important. Like modeling and simulation is, you should be able to predict. Now you say climate change, and it's a very loose term. Can you even list down what are the dimensions of climate change? I don't think so. But as good a job as you can do, what will happen? Temperature rise will happen. Now, with temperature rise, what can happen? What will be the impact on species? What will be the impact on uh, the people there? Now, impact on people is also different. It could be a political impact. It could be a economic impact. It could be a cultural impact. Because when people live in a particular area, what is repeatedly done is culture, right? So, culture also comes from the environment and the ecosystem. So, what will be the impact on that? So, all that has to be looked at. So, how will that change and are you prepared? I mean, then now people use one is climate risk assessment, the second is climate mitigation, and also the third is climate resilient. So, whatever now you are doing, is it resilient to the climate change risk that we run? So, those are different dimensions. But now, unless you can predict, it is not happening now, it is likely to happen in future. Now, even there is a problem of the scale. Now, are you looking, I mean, when you say scale, it is a spatio-temporal scale in space and in time. Now, when I said space, like suppose you're studying the impact on the Brahmaputra. Are you going to, your scale of your space is only the Brahmaputra river and its basin? Or is it from the oceans downward to the Himalayas on top? Unless it is the oceans to the top, it makes no sense. It has to be a larger global scale because climate process is not limited to a river on the basin. So your scale of whatever modeling you do has to be of that scale. Then only it makes sense. Otherwise, no point. Now, temporally, are you looking at a 25-year scale or you're looking at a 100-year scale? The impact, if you cut trees, impact is not going to be seen now, no? Or the complete impact won't be felt in next 10 years or 15 years, or it will be. So unless it is a 100-year scale, it makes no sense. You'll be really short of any meaningful outcome of that. So the scale also has to be accordingly. Now to do a modeling of 100-year scale and of a region that I talked about, do you have the infrastructure capability? I mean, what kind of computing are we talking about? What kind of data analytics are we talking about? So in the next workshop 2, we are going to be talking about all this. Now, when you say computing infrastructure or computing capabilities, people talk about high performance computing. So we have a gentleman, a senior scientist coming from CDAG, who's part of the National Supercomputing Mission, because there's a national mission on supercomputing. So we have requested him to come and he's agreed to come. So he's going to talk about what is high performance computing and, where we are today in India and what is the larger plan. But today people are talking about quantum computing also. So we have a gentleman coming, Venkat is coming, a close friend of mine coming from IBM. He's been part of quantum computing for more than 20 years now. He's a PhD from IIT Delhi, worked with IBM itself for 20 years plus. So he's an expert on quantum computing. So he's going to talk about, because that's the next big thing. So he's going to talk about quantum computing. Then Meta is becoming very big. Metaverse, right? So we have Manas who will be coming offline and he'll be interacting. Even HPC will be done offline. So they are going to give you different perspective. What are the different options? What are the comparison of the thing? So Meta will be looked at. But then data analytics. One is HPC and they are all hardware and, so-called the, the enablers. But then actual data analytics. People talk about AI loosely, but many people don't even understand what is AI. And unless you have a deep understanding of the domain and the application, it makes no sense. There are enough experts on AI. I'm not running down anybody. But that has to be combined with domain knowledge. Sometimes what happens is when there are two different people, it becomes very difficult to, build that communication. So my own team member Sridhar has been working with. We have been working together for last 7 years. So Sridhar is going to talk about AI and data analytics, and particularly with the underwater application. So we have tried to put a larger perspective to the entire thing. So these are, I think, important discussions. But then you need to know what are the applications that are talking about. So we have Commodore Soman Banerjee joining us offline. He'll be talking about the larger global order and what are the new challenges that we have going to face, or we are facing. Like the Nord Stream, there was a sabotage there, right? The gas pipeline, the whole reason for Ukraine war. And some say the Americans have done it themselves or whatever. I mean, I am no one to comment on that. But if you look at it, Nord Stream is an underwater gas pipeline. If you have built such massive assets, such high value assets, and if you cannot protect them, what are we talking about? So that's again underwater domain awareness. Then, as yesterday also it was being talked, internet cables. 97% of your internet connectivity comes from the undersea submarine cables. Is there a way to protect them or no? There have been cases where a few countries have been cut off from internet for more than 2 weeks. 2 weeks. Can you today imagine being cut off from the internet for 2 weeks? Forget about our usage. There are so many critical uses. Your banks will not work, right? Today, everything is on the cloud and everything is, so dependent on the internet connectivity. So just imagine getting completely off grid for 2 weeks. I mean, your stock exchange works so much on this. I mean, you imagine the kind of losses that will be there. Your even ports can stop working. Will stop working, not can. Will stop working. So, I mean, entire country can come to a standstill. I mean, you imagine hospitals today, people are doing robotic surgery, right? How will that work? So it's a very serious issue. So Commodore Banerjee is going to be talking about it. That and see, this is not that India can you protect alone. See, why are we getting a diplomat? And because they are the ones who negotiate on your behalf, on the country's behalf, to the other countries, and what are the areas. So that's why we have so many diplomats also coming and talking to us. Today we have Ambassador Javed Ashraf talking to us, and there's a small mistake in the thing. Ambassador Rajkumar Srivastava was supposed to come today afternoon, but he'll be joining us on 16th. I thought there should be a gap, and because he is also he'll be talking with the EU, because EU is now becoming very important for India. It is very important that we have a better understanding of what is the EU status and how we can interact with them. So again, so many different dimensions. So we are getting those people on the ground also who can define. Then Mr. Avinash Mishra will be joining us. He's a senior advisor to Niti Aayog looking at water. So he will be talking to everybody, and what is Niti Aayog, because they are the think tank for the government. So what is the government thinking on water, and what are the different? And he's been a remarkable person. I know him very personally, and because water is so very important. And many times, sitting here, we don't understand the challenges that the policymakers face at the top. Because when you look at India, it is such a diverse country. So many different communities, so many different stratas, economically, politically, culturally, even there are so many hierarchies within our country. I mean, we have done remarkably well that we have still remained so much united. But then, policymakers have to constantly keep up and catch up. So Avinash Mishra sir will be joining us from Niti Aayog and giving us a good perspective. Then we have the advisor to the Honorable Raksha Mantri, Lieutenant General Khandare, because now India is looking at defense in a very, very different way. We want to be a leader, a global leader in even defense exports. So the government of India is looking at it very, very differently. So we have General Khandare, who was, and if you look at his background, he was the DGDI, Director General Defense Intelligence. His last appointment in the army. After retirement, he was the military advisor to the NSA. And now he's the advisor to the Honorable Raksha Mantri. So, somebody who's seen policy making right at the top level. So he has been kind to, address this workshop. So he'll be joining us. And then on the last day, we have a panel discussion on the strategic security and governance. General Shekatkar, who was the chair of the Shekatkar committee, he will be joining us. He in fact, a mentor to MRC also. So he'll be giving the welcome address. And then we have Mr. Jayant Patil, who heads L&T Defense, because L&T is into defense in a very big way. I mean, they have very substantial stakes. But the government also has substantial stake in L&T. They are building a nuclear submarine for the country now. So and the Jain sir is the head of that. So he's joining us physically. He's coming down to Pune for this. Then Commandant NDA will be joining us on that day. So we have a very good panel. We're trying to cover as many dimensions so that, you get a different perspective of how things are done, and you get an opportunity to ask them questions one-to-one. Then we also have IG Krishna Prakash. He is heading, he's the IGP, special IGP for Coastal Police. We had the 2611, right? So what are we? I mean, there have been a lot of effort, but again, the country is so diverse. So he'll be part of the inaugural function also, and he'll be part of a panel discussion also. So we have a panel discussion on where it will be chaired by Jayant Umrinikar sir, who was the former DGP of Pune. Sorry, former DGP of Maharashtra. Then we have ADG Vijay Safekar, who was the number 2 in Additional Director General, just second to the DG Indian Coast Guard. He'll be joining us. And then Krishna Prakash sir will also. So we have a very diverse set of people talking, and then there'll be industry representative also. So we are trying to then even tomorrow post lunch, we have a lecture by Anuradha Bhosle on ethics in policy making. Because that's another very big challenge. It can't be so straight like technology, right? policy has to look at, when we say, so how do we define ethics? A whole lot of aspects are there. So we have tried to, put as many things as possible. So what we are planning is that every lecture is being recorded. I mean, my team, Rishikesh and Mehul are doing a fantastic job. You will get at the end of it, you will get the whole uh, program, and you can click and watch the lecture right there. I mean, this will be like a soft document which will come to you, to anybody. I mean, we are recording every lecture is being recorded. So whatever people have spoken, so you get a diverse perspective. And Midha is joining us from Delhi. She's heading UNESCO Natural Sciences in India. So Neha will be joining us today just after lunch. Neha and then Ambassador Javed Ashraf will be joining us. So because UNESCO is driving, they drive setting up of biosphere reserves. I mean, biosphere reserve is another very interesting thing. It is very political also. Because moment you make a biosphere reserve, like Anamika was talking the other day, there are certain zones which are completely banned for people. Then there's a buffer zone where people can, access. But it's a very big political decision to set up a biosphere reserve. So now, and moment it becomes a UNESCO recognized, then the dynamics become different. But then what happens to the local community there? Because local communities have their own aspirations. There are certain restrictions that come in there because you can't do construction there, you cannot do a lot of things. So in some way, there is a price to pay for the people. Yes, of course, the nature will benefit, but in the long run, you need, those lungs within the city. If you cut all the trees or you do not have, I mean, see, policy making, these are certain instruments of preventing certain things to happen. Otherwise, so many trees can be cut and you can do a lot of construction there. Yes, it can earn you a lot of money, but at the same time, at what cost? So how do you look at that cost is something very, very important. So there are now different techniques of evaluating the cost. So it's very, very difficult. It's a challenge, but I think there is a lot of work, a lot of research that has happened. People are working on different aspects. Like the UN itself, when you saw yesterday for the SDGs also, whether you've been able to achieve those SDGs, there are certain targets, there are certain indicators, like what Selja had mentioned, and it was but it requires a much comprehensive understanding. Even understanding the indicators itself is not so simple, I would say. Have you been able to really do justice to it or not is something we really need to ask a question. So it's a long answer to your thing, but I just wanted to kind of bring a little bit of connection to what we have been planning and how it is being received. But I mean, I feel sad that people who are going to join next week have lost out on the first week, the deliberation. So what we will do is give them these tools so that they can catch up on the previous thing. Because otherwise, yeah, I mean, I'm happy you all will have a connection right from now to the end. And even the third phase where we are going to take them to the field, that is another different experience. So I hope people join us. Yes, any questions from Rishika? Is there any question on the chat box? Anything?
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, any more questions here? Yeah. Yes, sir, please.
Just out of my curiosity, is there any project going on for our Khadakosla dam for sedimentation management or?
No, there are a lot of groups that are working. One is the entire the periphery of the Khadakwasla. There is a project going. There are organizations which are working on it. But to my knowledge, nothing for the water or
Nothing for the
underwater.
water.
Yes. So
For the sedimentation?
yeah, water sedimentation, to my knowledge, there is nothing. But on the sides, there's a lot of work that is going on. I mean, it has to be a comprehensive work. I mean, even what they're doing is extremely important. See, sediment is coming from the sides only, no?
Yeah.
So they're doing a lot of plantation, they're doing a lot of, and also creating a lot of awareness. Because in India, we have very little respect for our water bodies, which is not fair. I mean, if you go abroad, people, I mean, although it is part of our culture, we we pray. So many of our religious festivals are related to water, right? We go and pray looking at the water body, or we worship water. But practically, if you see, there is no respect for the water. I mean, so many of our streams are. So Khadakwasla is definitely, but we are also now reaching out to the local authorities that the underwater also is important. Like now, this river is being cleaned. There's a Zyka project which is almost, I think, 5,000 crores. So there's a lot. I mean, government is definitely even. In fact, they are trying even on the Mula Mutha also. They're going to be working on the water transport.
Okay.
Whether it will be for carrying of goods or just small passenger ferries that they're working out. So there is definitely a lot of discussion.
Okay.
And already, I mean, the project is approved, money has come, so work has also started. You'll see if you look from this side, there is already water start. The work has started. Sure.
Thank you.
Sir, I just remembered that when you said about the fish migration, and you even quoted the example of USA.
Yeah.
So one of the projects USA is doing that. There is annually there is a migration of salmons upstream, and because of building of dams, what they have done, the smaller streams they have connected with what we can say, a kind of pipe which helps them migrate upstream, and they are continuing the cycle, and they are also doing aquaculture there with salmons. So which is also
See, that's fine, but the problem is, you can't, I mean, really solve the problem like this.
Replace the
These
natural-
are quick fix solutions, more for media glare.
right.
But I mean, you break your leg and then say that I can, repair it is not going to help.
Right.
So it's a very, very. So that's why they are breaking all, the dams now in US. The salmon and all these things are some important. It's not just salmon; it's so many other species which are dependent on the salmon. Can you ever establish all the linkages in the ecosystem?
No.
You can never. I don't think humans have become so smart. They think they're smart, but I don't think we can really. I mean, there are so many more microorganisms which are dependent, right? So you have just picked up. See, it's a problem of species-based conservation. No?
Right.
You just know salmon, and because it has high value, you are trying all this, and that's also somebody's trying to make money by the solution. I don't think it works, right?
Right. Sir.
And nobody's done a larger impact assessment also.
Right. Sir.
So some cases you will I mean, you saved 100 salmons. Does it help? So that's the thing. So,
Right. Sir. Thank you.
yeah, you wanted to ask a question? Yeah.
सर यही क्वेश्चन था कि आपने वो जैसे मुला और मुठा का कंजर्वेशन के बारे में, क्लीनिंग के बारे में बताया, लेकिन जो भी रिवर्स है जो इंडस्ट्रियल एरिया से पास होके जा रही है, बड़ी बड़ी इंडस्ट्रीज वेस्ट वाटर है वो तो क्लीन करके भेज रहे हैं, लेकिन व्हाट अबाउट MSMEs या स्मॉल कंपनीज, दे आर डायरेक्टली छोड़ दे रहे पानी रिवर्स में वो पानी, तो उनके लिए ऐसा कुछ हो रहा है कि कोई ऐसा हर एक कंपनी का इकट्ठा आके पानी कलेक्ट होगा पोल्यूटेड, फिर वो फिल्टर के बाद में रिवर में छोड़ा जाएगा, या फिर
नहीं, वो आप सही कह रहे हो. देखो, इट इज नॉट वायबल फॉर अ स्मॉल इंडस्ट्री और MSME टू हैव अ पर्सपेक्टिव. सो आजकल वो SEZ वगैरह का कॉन्सेप्ट आया हुआ है, कंप्लीट इंडस्ट्रियल बेल्ट. तो देन देयर इज अ लार्जर रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ द गवर्नमेंट. Government moves in, or collectively they try to take care of that. So अभी maturity तो आ रहा है. पहले तो क्या है, it was they mushroom on their own and अपने आप धीरे धीरे बड़े होते हैं. But अभी regulatory, I mean, there is a Kuznets curve, as they say. So शुरू में जब भी होता है, with development, the environmental degradation is a linear curve. Development जैसे होता है, the environment degradation keeps increasing. But then at some point, like अभी जैसे हम यहाँ पे बैठ के बात कर रहे हैं, we are talking about environment, and so the consciousness of the people increases. So then the regulations start coming in. So that is the first inflection point. कि अभी people are conscious. आप वोट नहीं दोगे अगर लोगों ने ठीक से नहीं किया, if they have not taken care of. Like अभी यूरोप में तो there are environment parties only. They are asking votes in the name of environment. अभी इंडिया में वो आया नहीं, but आ जाएगा वो भी. That people will start making political parties and saying that. So once people have that consciousness, then slowly क्या होता है, धीरे धीरे at a certain stage the manufacturing industry itself goes out of your country. Now the west, अभी जैसे सिंगापुर है, वहां पे मैन्युफैक्चरिंग नहीं होता है, the big cities में मैन्युफैक्चरिंग नहीं होता है. So that is the next stage. So वहां पे फिर सर्विस इंडस्ट्री, इकोनॉमी keeps going up. वहां पे only service industries are there, or financial institutions are there, or big corporate houses are there. So that is called the Kuznets curve. So although economy keeps on increasing, but the environmental degradation keeps coming down. So abhi, because abhi government is also looking at this. Environment ministry is very active. So that the regulations can be brought in. Abhi jaise us din Deepak had joined from Dr. Deepak had joined from NSCSC, right? National Center for Sustainable Coastal Management. That is a component of the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. So that's a very big center. वो लोग ये data, he showed you those CRZ maps and all, ना? तो वो लोग काम कर रहे हैं. अभी coastal development में, whether you can set up an industry, whether you can set up a port, whether you can set up a resort, there has to be a master plan which should optimize. So that is what they do. So government is also conscious. Abhi ho raha hai. I mean, India also, see, for a government also, so many establishments will have to be built, जो कि ये study करें, advise करें government को. So now we are maturing, तो अभी हो रहा है. Definitely there is a lot of work happening. And लोगों का भी consciousness होना जरूरी है.
और एक था कि ओके कि जो सेडिमेंट्स आ रहे हैं और वो पोल्यूटेड रिवर से जा रहे हैं, तो उसका फिल्ट्रेशन, वो जो सेडिमेंट है उसका फिल्ट्रेशन या क्लीनिंग के लिए ऐसा कोई प्रोजेक्ट्स हो रहे हैं?
नहीं, वही हो रहा है. देखिए अभी क्या है, प्लीज. हाँ, प्लीज.
Recently, as a curriculum activity of my college, I have taken students to the STP at Baner. So that is one of the smartest STP, totally based on SCADA, and one of the best and effective, efficient STP. So out of your question, I am just telling you, besides seeds, one more project STP has been planned and sanctioned also. They are very good doing. The intake of all the Baner and Pasha and all that suburbs is getting there. That I have seen that grey water, and output of the plant is like, you can, if you don't know, you can take it for the household. That was of that effectiveness. ग्लास में अगर पानी लो तो आपको लगेगा बिल्कुल क्लीन वाटर है. That much effective that plant is. So to answer to your question, उसके बाजू में जो गंदा नदी है, that Ram Nadi and all they call, so dirty, you can't walk from there. So the another STP plant is been planned and sanctioned there, that they are taking input from the river, upper stream of that Ram Nadi, and then they will again send it back to river. So that is also there, and of course there is a huge punishment for these culprits, what you are telling. But to implement nahi ho raha, that is a different issue. But government is taking that actions.
नहीं, that's right. But वही है, अभी देखिए इसमें बहुत सारे dimensions हैं, अलग अलग ministries are involved, और but वही है, clean करना बड़ी अच्छी बात है, but it's like, why are you dirtying it to then, because see, cleaning is not coming easy, no? It costs money. Not only setting up that plant, but also the energy that will be used. आप सोचो एक continuous plant आपका चलता रहेगा, how much energy will it consume? वो एनर्जी प्रोवाइड करने के लिए आप और पेड़ काटोगे. सो दैट इज द थिंग. सो यू हैव टू हैव अ वेरी होलिस्टिक अप्रोच कि आप कितना मिनिमाइज कर सकते हैं, और हाउ मच यू कैन यूज. अभी जैसे सोलार पे कितना काम हो रहा है. आई मीन इंडिया इज वेरी ब्लेस्ड. ट्रॉपिकल कंट्रीज में 300 डेज ऑफ सनलाइट यू गेट. यूरोप में आपको 150 दिन से ज्यादा नहीं मिलता है. तो अभी हम यहाँ पे जो अवेलेबल है उसको नहीं यूज कर रहे हैं, बट कहीं और जा रहे हैं ढूंढने के लिए. So definitely there's a lot of, I mean, solar mission is there. अभी काफी उस पे काम हो रहा है. But वही है, it cannot be replaced. I mean, जो present है, it cannot be replaced. तो उसको कैसे हम आगे कर सकते हैं? So there is a lot of thought process. इसमें बहुत research होने की जरूरत है. And also अभी ban भी आप नहीं कर सकते. अगर आप इतने छोटे इंडस्ट्रीज को, अभी आप देखो MSMEs and SMEs provide 95% of the jobs. और अभी ये पैंडेमिक के बाद द नंबर्स उनका, दे आर लूजिंग, दे आर नॉट डूइंग वेल. SMEs and MSMEs आर नॉट डूइंग वेल. सो इफ 95% जॉब क्रिएटर्स आर नॉट डूइंग वेल, तो देश का क्या होगा? हम जो इकोनॉमी की बात कर रहे हैं, इकोनॉमी इज डूइंग वेल, द बिग इंडस्ट्रीज आर डूइंग वेल, स्मॉल इंडस्ट्रीज आर नॉट डूइंग वेल. But small industries give that much more jobs. So job creator for a particularly, we are not Europe, right? हमारे यहाँ पे population कितना ज़्यादा है? So unless everybody gets a decent job, a meaningful job, engagement and a livelihood, how will the country progress? ऐसा तो नहीं है ना कि आप 10% people have got very good jobs and 90% people don't have jobs at all. तो ऐसा नहीं हो सकता. तो our solutions have to be very different from the West. That's why India is a very complex country in many ways. तो कई चीजें हमें we have to have a balanced view. ये अभी कोई बाहर से वेस्ट से ट्रीटमेंट प्लांट लेके आके he is putting it here and making big money. That's a good part. But at what cost? अभी वो प्लांट लगा के is he going to pay for it? Then you will tell the SMEs to pay for it. Will they have the money to pay for it? High technology cost comes with a higher cost. Can we not put a thing which is adapted or customized to our requirement? So we have to think differently. We have to think very innovatively. वो कोई आके बोलता है मेरे पास ये solution है, वो बेच के भी चला जाता है. That's what Ambassador Mudgal was also saying. The African leader was saying, Cameroon leader was saying, कि the white comes and tells me what I need. He's not even asking me what I need. Then he says how he will solve my problem. And both cost money. And उसका impact, वो जो मेरे को help करके गया, उसको actually really में मेरा help हुआ कि नहीं, that you will come to know after 20 years. By then you have already actually, see, you have limited resources. If you put money in a certain thing, you have actually deprived many other opportunities. So it has to be a holistic approach. So that's what I want to. I hope I have answered your question. Yeah? Yes, so let's take some questions from the chat. Rishika, can you read out and please answer the questions? These are more directed to you.
Yes, sir, I have answered it. So Rupali Joshi was asking, when dredging happens regularly in all ports, sediments is big product. What is scientific way to handle these sediments? Like because 24/7 generation happens. So like I have answered like for the production, like the once the sediments is produced, then instead of throwing it in the sea or the ocean waters, like using it in other construction processes or landscaping processes, or in general while constructing our sediment and structures, like we can use other sustainable alternatives to dredging, which in the first place discourage the collection of sediments, or developing anti-sediment structures, or structures which do not allow sediments to collect in large amounts, so that we won't need the use of dredging in such large scale.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I want to give you an example. See, dredging should be the last resort. Because even yesterday, Radhika ma'am was also saying that, dredging has many side effects, but it's a last solution that you should be deployed. Firstly, it's very expensive. So, I mean, I can give you the example of JNPT. They spend 150 crores annually on the dredging itself, which has made the whole project itself very, very unviable. It's actually the Europeans who have built heavy machinery and now they're too happy to sell it to us. And, so they push you that, dredging is the only way, but I don't think that is the right way. There are many other possibilities which Rishika mentioned, and that's the whole reason we are doing this project. Understanding the sediment transport pattern can actually divert the sediment in a natural way, so that, see, what is the requirement? You don't want the channel to be full of sediment, right? You want to avoid siltation of the main channel. So if you can divert the silt in a manner using the natural forces, then you can minimize. So that is the whole purpose of this project. Sediment transport study will allow you to understand the sediment transport pattern, and then you deploy. I mean, of course, if something is left, then a bit of dredging is fine, but you cannot use dredging as a primary mode. it is not only expensive, it has many other side effects in terms of really ruining the whole benthic ecosystem and various other things. So that is the thing, that is the whole purpose of this study. I hope I have answered. You can go to the next question.
I don't think there was any.
Okay, we have answered. Okay, I think, thank you, Rishika. So thank you very much. Welcome back. We started the day with a presentation on sediment transport by our research fellow, Rishika Khanna. Now we have a very important lecture by Captain Sudhir Subedar, sir. He's had a long and illustrious career in the shipping sector, both at the operations level and at the policy making level. And in the last few years, he has been very, very intensely involved in the inland water transport. So I will request, as our tradition, I will request the Honorable Speaker to please talk about himself, his journey, various organizations, some important aspects that he would like us to know, and then start his presentation. So, Subedar sir.
I saw many people had signed on first day. I could not make it that day in person. I was here yesterday and I'm here today and will be here tomorrow as well. I began my adult education coming out of a military school in Belgaum. I joined the Dufferin, the only training ship or any training academy at that time, precursor to National Defense Academy, etc. Way back in 1927, it was commissioned after the First World War was over. I sailed with Shipping Corporation of India, served them in the office. I joined Anglo-Eastern Hong Kong in both afloat and ashore. I was with International Maritime Organization for 5 years. And then joined a startup called Ocean Sparkle Limited, which was recently taken over by Adani's. A small company which began in Hyderabad, a non-port area, into one of the largest port and offshore services company, sold for 1,100 crores to Adani's. I was elected Director Technical in National Ship Owners and President and CEO of Indian Coastal Shipping. And I've been, like Commander Das said, been most of last 20 years or so, been at the forefront of domestic shipping in general and inland waterways transport in particular. I'm a Maharashtrian coming domicile in Uttar Pradesh on the banks of the Ganges, and hence the relationship to inland water transport. My ancestral house is right on the banks of the Ganges. Me or my member of the family have been working with Ganges in one way or the other for many, many years. Dredging being one of the activities that we have been carrying out for last 40 odd years on the banks of the Ganges and its tributaries and channels that lead to the thermal power stations. Inland water transport has been a neglected sector for better part of our independent tenure of last 75 years. Although in 1985, the Inland Waterways Authority in Noida was established to commission already navigable waters into a systematic transportation system, starting with the 5 national waterways. The 1985 Inland Waterways Authority under the Ministry of Transport at that time, then Ministry of Shipping, and now it is called Ministry of Shipping, Ports and Waterways. ex-Chief Minister of Assam, from where Commander Das comes from. Mr. Sonwalji is the Honorable Minister for Shipping, Ports and Waterways now. The Inland Waterways Authority is headed by a chairman of the IS cadre, equivalent of Additional Chief Secretary of the Government of India, presently occupied by one Mr. Sanjay Bandyopadhyay, who was also Additional Secretary Shipping before this tenure. In this government, in its last session in 2016, for the purposes of focus on infrastructure, added another 111 waterways. Now we have a National Waterways Act, which includes 5 plus 111 waterways. The idea they promoted was that since water is an interface of land and that water cannot be everywhere, we must bring water closer and closer to the end user. So the same idea has grown what is called the SAGAR Mala. It is dotting of small terminals and ports all around the Indian coast so that even Surat would have some, even Bangalore would have some waterfront. So a combination of inland waterways, 5 plus 111, and the Sagar Mala would eventually bring each one of us to as close a water body as possible. Reason for this is that in fluid, both in air and in water, there are no breaks. And therefore, it is the most economical means of transport. Airlines lose out a little bit because of its speed and high fuel consumption and special fuel that is required to run aircraft. Otherwise, you will see those of you are sitting in engineering college, M into V or mass into velocity of a vessel or an aircraft more or less comes to the same thing. One is mass is much more in shipping, velocity is that much less. In aircraft, mass is less, velocity is that much more. The momentum that requires to be stopped is almost the same. But because there are no brakes, most of the horsepower can be utilized for propulsion rather than overcoming friction. And that makes it very economical. From transportation point of view, tons per kilometer is almost 30% less by water compared to any other means of transport. But because the infrastructure has not been aligned to this unique phenomena, the end result is point to point freight rate or passenger rate turns out to be not 30% cheaper, but a few percent higher than what it should have been. So couple of reasons for that. The first mile and last mile connectivity, which should have come out of infrastructure, has not come about. There are far too many layers of middlemen involved in transportation by water. Because water is not at your doorstep, you cannot come out of the door and step into that transport. Somebody needs to take you to the waterfront. So that's one middle. Joining that thing is one more. Moving out of water is one more. Coming to the other end is one more. Like this, there are several layers of impediments which otherwise make 30% cheaper mode of transport into a little more expensive mode of transport, a little more inconvenient mode of transport. Only from 2016, there is little bit of focus, thanks to a few people who have been knocking at the doors of the government to make a policy on modal shift of cargo and people. Recently, you must have read in papers about backwaters of Bombay being connected by electric boat ferries, etc., etc. All this could have been possible many, many years ago. And today, like Southeast Asian countries or developed countries or the European Union countries, we would have had a significant share of water transport in India. Compared to G20 countries, transport component used in India is 40% less. Japan is 44%, Greece is 44%, EU in general is 35%, United States with a large coastline and a much larger comparable freight has about 40% water transport exposure, which India does not have. Indian water transport exposure at the moment on domestic shipping side is less than 5%, and on the water it is less than 2%, which is pitiably low figure for a developed economy wanting to become a 5 trillion economy in 5 years' time. Paucity of vessels, suitable vessels, low draft vessels. We need, you can see the, this is a typical Japan, Southeast Asia, America picture of a water barge carrying 100 containers. These containers are called ISO containers. They are standard because they could be in India, they could be in America, they could be in Antarctica, they could be in Timbuktu. All have to be 20 feet by 8 feet and weigh not more than 20 tons. Its four corners must match every other container in the world. Your container could be first here, it could be seventh tomorrow there. The four corners must bear the weight across the board, across the world. This kind of scene is yet to be seen in India. This container transport of about 2,000 tons, 100 containers is going at less than 30% of the logistic cost in India. And who bears the logistic cost? At the end of the day, the end user, the consumer. These containers ought to be made along the water side everywhere in India. It's not rocket science, it's exactly a corrugated box with unique 8 corners. That's all there is to it. 97% of the market today is of China. I'm trying to make, with a joint venture partner, 2 container facilities, one in Itarsi and one in Varanasi. A bit of introduction to my presentation. The inland water transport, in addition to the few observations that I made here to before, is a state subject. So whenever there is a state subject, there is always double engine and triple engine and one engine natak that you hear in the press. So Yogi Ji's double engine government in Uttar Pradesh is doing fairly well at the moment on inland water transport initiatives. 1.5 engine in Maharashtra is doing that much not well. And some places where it should be doing so much well in Kerala and Tamil Nadu is not doing at all. The Inland Water Transport Directorate report to Noida office, but they also have to have some kind of connection with what is called state maritime boards, which do not have an inland vessel jurisdiction, but they have coastal waters jurisdiction. The Indian Merchant Shipping Act, which is what I and most of the seagoing people would come from, is for vessels that go to sea. A very conceptual requirement that a vessel which goes to sea must be governed by Merchant Shipping Act. Everything else must be governed by what is called Inland Vessel Act, which means a vessel which does not go to sea. Now, this term, which vessel does not go to sea, has not been defined anywhere and has been part of many, many high court battles because it has not been possible, deliberately or otherwise, to define what is going to sea. Indirectly, Inland Vessel Act says a vessel which does not go out to sea means a vessel which is not encountering waves of more than 2 meters significant wave height. those of you who may be of mechanical engineering bend or that kind of branch of science, significant wave height is a mathematical concept. Suffice to say that 2 meters means 6 feet water wave में जो जहाज चलेगा, that is a sea-going vessel. Everything else below that is an IV vessel. Very abstract concept which needs to be defined to avoid the court battles that are going on for ever and ever. And becomes a big contradiction between the state governments and the central governments. The Inland Vessel Act 2022, replacing the Inland Vessel Act of the British colonial days of 1907, should have solved this problem once and for all, but unfortunately it did not. And I'm hoping that the rules made under the IV Act 2022 will take into account what the stakeholders are wanting to see. Just like we do road repairs and NHAI and national highways, state highways, etc., the water which is God given or nature given is free. The passage is free, but it does require maintenance. The riverside communities have very good hang or knowledge, father to son, grandfather to son kind of situation, where hydrodynamic forces of the river are used to what is called river training, which is basically making screens of bamboo mats and bamboo sticks and putting across the stream in such a way that the sand that is flowing together with the velocity falls at the point where you don't want it to fall. And therefore you get a nice stream going across all the places where you want the stream to go. Together with dredging, which means basically Khanna, as you hear in the press, not sand mining per se, but deepening of the water. Because without deepening of the water, without removing the potholes on the road, trucks cannot ply. Similarly, without deepening the waters, the ship cannot or the vessel cannot ply. For an economic quantity, like the barge you see here, about 2,000 tons at an approximate depth of 6 to 7 feet or 2.2 meters is required. The depth is adequate, at some places not more than 2 meters, but it is worthwhile trying and making sure that the trucks do not go via Chembur to New Bombay and that they travel with a nice ramp system from Gateway of India or thereabouts or Kolaba area to Vashi and beyond. Similarly, there is scope for trying this kind of vessels in Gulf of Cambay, Gulf of Mannar, where one can use the Park Strait to cross between East and West India rather than go along 7-8 days of extra travel along rounding Ceylon or Sri Lanka. The Ram Setu project, which was started by the erstwhile government, has come under fire after spending about 3,000 crores. It is discovered that Ram Setu cannot be touched or damaged, as written in the mythological books of Lord Hanuman having crossed that bridge 10,000 years ago. A via media needs to be found. Now that the LTT is not there, similar channels can be found next to Sri Lanka, north of Sri Lanka, and perhaps SAARC countries can get together and find a suitable means of channel so that there is a good traffic between East Coast and West Coast of India for reducing the logistic cost of train travel or road travel between Chennai and Tuticorin, for example. Dredging has a very good output. Virgin sand that comes out of the river, or the yellow clay, fine clay that comes out of the river. Most rivers of India are called alluvial soil. They are small, very thin, suspended dust particles, sand particles. It would be very nice if this work of dredging is given primarily to builders who have a stake in the output. Manrega, which gives money for making rural roads, should also deploy district courts, district which are bound by rivers. The Manrega money can also be used for deepening the rivers. CSR funding, because we are cheaper, also the most environment friendly, the CSR funds also should come towards dredging. Any which way, the river must be made navigable for economic transportation. One needs special crew compared to my kind of training of seagoing. So there are local communities, 8 standard pass, 10 standard pass, who are doing whiling away their time in villages on the banks of the rivers. They can all be rounded up together and suitable training given. And Badass made approaches to various state governments for making this happen, but unfortunately the daylight hasn't come into the tunnel as yet. I'm sure I'll be able to commission good crew, suitable crew for this kind of work on the inland water barges. I mean, those of us who have been to Germany, for example, we have seen a couple, wife and husband, and some relative, and one dog and one parrot running the show. Environment protection is, of course, there. When we do not wish to pollute the rivers. But let us not overdo it when Sardarji and train driver and train passengers are still going with chemical toilet coming in and hardly any health, safety, environment protection on the roadside and on the track side. If you try to build all this HSC into river transport, you will be killing the system like throwing the baby with the bathwater. So slowly, we have to take care of environment. Let us begin, one should begin in small measure, not bring out all and take the advantage that it is otherwise the most environment friendly transportation system, less fuel, less smoke, less carbon, etc., etc. Little bit of plastic, etc. we should be able to control. Sewage, one would have to take a little back step, and holding tanks, etc., can come little later. In this regard, since this is the MRC is particularly technology driven, I do want to make an observation that technology is for aid to thinking and not replacing thinking. All this awareness must be for us to think more, not to replace our thinking. I will now share a few slides and give an extempore comment on each of those slides as we go along. For make shipping lean and thin. There's far too much of regulation at the moment in shipping compared to a truck or a rail. You can see on the rail side, they have made shipping, like I told you, IWAI, Ministry, direct rate, state transport, maritime state boards, so far too many things in a rather simple equation of water transportation, which is not there in the truck, which is not there in taxi, which is not there in Pune autos. Why so much of regulation in inland water transport? That's the replica of what Steve Jobs used to say in his own company. Next, please. I went through all that. over lunch, you can quiz me on any of those items. All it says that water transport for passenger is very much need of the hour, and we are seeing little bit of it uh, in dotted around the countryside. You have recently heard Prime Minister's focused project of a very large, very long and sufficiently large river cruise vessel which went from Varanasi to Dibrugarh, a 47-day voyage, which came out of not like bus, but a very fancy vessel. But we still don't know exact voyage report of that, and I hope I'll be able to share that with MRC when I have hang a little bit more on that voyage report, which began on 13th of January and just finished day before yesterday with Swiss passengers on board. Next, please. I mentioned about dredging, alluvial soil, cutter suction or only suction dredger, indigenously made. I make them in Kanpur with local Kirloskar pumps, indigenously designed impellers. I'm hoping that under the UDA program, sooner or later we would be able to get some help from good uses of underwater noise to do sedimentation mapping, to find depth and dredge as much as we can at the right point. The river, the same dredger was escorting from Varanasi to Patna, the Ganga Vilas cruise vessel, and we had to dredger out at 5 points in within 200 kilometers by just using cutter suction dredgers. Simple equipment, no need of Netherlands imports, etc. Make in India works very well, and indigenously designed impeller. We know how to what is there in the water rather than Kirloskars making it in Kirloskar Wadi. Next, please. This is the background I've been talking about. Very old water transport has come even before the wheels. People used to travel on water other than walking on the land many years ago. It's only over the years that water transport became unreliable for domestic use, but we still have no option for international trade. It must happen only by water. The continents and the countries are only connected by water. So the politics and policy should be seen differently, both for domestic shipping and foreign going shipping. Next, please. Just a artist picture showing LNG gas bullets that could be easily used to make inland water transport even better and profitable if LNG is used on water and such bullets are available for bunkering or refueling on the way between Haldia and Varanasi and between Dibrugarh and Sundarbans, for example. Many other places, this may not immediately happen, but I hope that something like this will come about in the next 5 years on the Ganges and Brahmaputra for sure. Next, please. To increase freight transportation, we need safer modes of transportation, seamless transfer of freight between sea-going and coastal. Japan, China, and European Union have very good synergy systems between foreign-going shipping and coastal shipping. Next. This is that example I showed you. This is showing a pictorial figure of that, 30% or so cheaper by water. And the next one will show, so on the basis, last one please, similar presentation of indigenization and differences between what can happen by just dredging, some lot of saving can be made. Next. This is the difference between road, rail, and IWT. You can see IWT is a clear winner compared to road and rail, just because of overcoming friction. Next, please. This is a Sagarmala kind of concept where you can see that all the way water is being brought to end user as closer as possible so that there is first mile and last mile connectivity maintained for freight transport. Next, please. Another tug and barge. Tug is a small vessel which is like a trailer which can pull a barge, which need not have the heavy machinery, and the barge could be transported, and the tug could go and some other place, bring another barge. So this tug and barge combination is most widely used in American continent, where barges are dumb barges carrying the cargo or the passengers, and the tugs are only the pushing or pulling them in this capacity. Next, please. Pictorial SOLAS is the convention for shipping. And you can see, I cannot do anything like this on water transport, but here we see this all the time, and this one does not allow us to do anything like that. So this fellow also, when he's forced not to do this, more and more loads of that can come to inland water transport. On small hauls, on small distances, across the river, side the river, small points on the river. ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए. You see, many times you can see I-beams that are going with one lal phadka hanging outside the trailer. That is not allowed on a ship. So that should not also be allowed. So that fellow will have to either design the I-beam so that it doesn't go out of the trailer. In either way, if there is more HSC of this kind, of SOLAS kind, which is applicable to shipping, then more and more transfer of modal shift will happen to the water, is what I'm trying to say in this slide. Another policy decision. In Germany, once I was traveling and I saw all kinds of trucks waiting on the shoulder, left-hand side and right-hand side. I inquired what happened. What we call NHA, one more higher than NHA is called Autobahn, where they have to maintain certain speed to go across 200 to 300 kilometers without left turn or right turn. So their logistic managers must make sure that no trailer, no truck is on the Autobahn between Friday night and Monday morning. Otherwise, there is a logistic loss. So what happens? The more and more transfer happens to the Rhine River to avoid this problem on Autobahn. Because Autobahn does not permit freight cargo on Autobahn, which is for you and your family to make use of on weekend. It's a policy kind of decision which impacts transportation and logistic cost. Our logistic cost is 14%, Germany's logistic cost is 8%, and it's one of the highest rich countries in the world. Because of that policy decision, there are dentists and doctors who invest into IWT. Dentists and doctors don't even know what IWT is. Small investors are not coming to invest. Big investors are not interested at all. But I should be able to at least commission some doctors who invest into Mula Mutha transportation system. Please read through. I've been talking most of it all the time. 12 major porters, over 100 private ports. Very, very little carrying capacity on water. This is a different saying, but water transport is so essential to world economy in terms of IMO, which is a body that not governs. It's a misconception that they neither govern nor police. They are once upon a time called IMCO, Consultative Organization of the United Nations. It is now a body which oversees international shipping. It does not do so much of domestic shipping. But there is a synergy between domestic shipping and foreign shipping. And once the Secretary General did remark that but for water transport and seafarers, half the world would go hungry and half the world will go cold because no oil would be transported and no food grains would be transported if there were no shipping and seafarers. The Merchant Shipping Act requires such a mention in its new avatar, the new Merchant Shipping Act that is going to come to nurture Indian shipping. The estimated cost of changing to green shipping in next 5 years is more than $1.4 trillion. 14,000 vessels have to be changed in next 2 years. So it's a gigantic task. There are no shipyards and no capacity to make anything like this happen. Next. Contribute meaningfully to climate change, enable ships to run safely, invest in people for lean shipping. Some bodies to lead such activities. CMMI could also mean MRC. Do not allow to use shipping as a cash cow for global warming. Without shipping and seafarers, half the world would starve and half the world would go cold. What Mr. Admiral Metropolis said at the IMO a few years ago. Next, please. So shipping is the best way to reduce carbon footprint. You can see coming down, and I'll be happy to take questions in the lunch break or now if there is any immediately. Yeah, so you can go back on any slide you want.
So can you talk about the Brahmaputra and the inland water transport there? What are the specific concerns and opportunities?
Brahmaputra is national waterway number 2, national waterway number 1 being the Ganges. So my simple answer to your question is that let us wait for the voyage report of Ganga Vilas, which for the first time has made a voyage from Varanasi NW1 to Dibrugarh, way beyond NW2, through Bangladesh. Impediments are the least available depth, suitable vessels, suitable crew, suitable landing places, suitable refueling places, all kinds of interstate and intrastate permissions. I was telling you in the tea break that I made a similar voyage from the Ganga Vilas voyage, which was under the command of the Prime Minister's office, has been able to overcome all kinds of obstacles. And 7-8 months ago, when I did a voyage for steel cargo between Varanasi and Haldia, I was delayed by 13 days. And this vessel, due to Prime Minister's office, completed the voyage in 3 days earlier than its estimated 50 days. There are pontoon bridges. There are low-hanging bridges. There are intersection bridges, which cause a lot of problems for a vessel which is not suitably designed for this run. There are no good or efficient crew and navigation systems. This vessel, Ganga Vilas, had to park every day at a sightseeing place in the evening, do the sightseeing and start again in the morning, which means basically 12 hours of job. No business can survive on 12 hours of transportation job. Assam has had a host of history of North Assam and South Assam being divided equally or little bit 60%, 40% by the mighty Brahmaputra River. The new IV Act 2022, which is pan-India, and yet most state governments have not been able to give effect to its requirements. Ports which are plying in Brahmaputra are not bad, but not suitable today for the kind of work that they are doing. They do not have, for example, stern-going capabilities, which should be a requirement under the IV Act now. But overnight, if you start telling a cycle rickshawala to change to auto, an auto rickshawala to change to LNG, an LNG fellow to change to hydrogen, and hydrogen to change to something else, it's not going to happen. So anybody who wants to make changes to Assam river transportation system must be also ready to give some helping hand to come forward and change thousands and thousands of boats which are plying in Assam and are dependent on its for its day-to-day living and for the local economy.
So they did some trial runs on with Maersk lines on the Ganga, and they want to set up a river port, and they want to set up 2,000 river ports, and all this is all at the deliberation stage now. So, what is the timeline you see, sir, like for this to pan out, and for this to get into a stage where inland vessels will become viable, and another 10 years, 15 years, what would be the timeline you would?
Sir, my timeline was yesterday.
Okay.
So
No, but realistically, I mean, I agree
so
that is a very idealistic thing.
The example that you gave of Maersk Line, which is a very large Danish company,
Yes.
they've already discharged themselves from the Indian ports.
Okay.
They are concentrating first on the Bangladesh because the help, the policy help that was required from Indian side did not come. So they have moved their focus to the stretch of Bangladesh, which enters from Sundarbans and comes out of at a place called Pandu. So we have to watch and see how Maersk Line pans
not
out.
Maersk Line. That is just an example I quoted, sir.
Yeah.
See, what is the timeline realistically for us to get our waterways going? In that sense, I'm saying. We've declared 116 waterways, and even the Mula Mutta has been declared. And so a realistic timeline for things to become visible, like across the nation, 20,000 kilometers, because that has got a huge job creation potential. That's
Yes. I agree with what you're saying. Given my thrust, I would say 2024.
After that, things will move.
By 2024, you should be able to see a viable, visible IWT in India.
Okay, that's good. Just 1 year, sir.
Yeah.
Oh, that's it. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
What is your comment on the comprehensive ecosystem? I mean, because we need an ecosystem. You've been stressing on various aspects. So, do you think somebody is looking at the larger ecosystem that will be required to drive this?
Commander Das, I would say the answer is mostly no, because if it was so, both national logistic policy and the maritime vision 2030 would have been hailed in our circles. But what I have been telling in both NLP meetings and as well as maritime vision 2030 meetings, that we need systematic change. Only infrastructure change, and today's Times of India says that just infrastructure without looking into chaos that it creates while building is not the way forward. And that's what is happening at the moment.
Yes, sir, you're right. I think the level playing field has to be really implemented so that it's a comprehensive. I mean, that's what I think. Comprehensive ecosystem will be extremely important. Otherwise, it will not encourage people to, even in the name of environment or cost, it will not encourage people to go towards the waterways.
Yeah. But the focus is that it is proven fact that it is 1/3 cheaper and most environment friendly transport system. That it is not outside your door is the only thing that is to be overcome, and that is to be overcome by policymakers.
Absolutely. Sir, the next question is on capacity building. I mean, what is your take on what is the level of capacity? Because when I say capacity, I'm talking at both horizontal and vertical. I mean, one is at the policymaker itself. I mean, what you and me are saying sounds quite obvious, but it is not obvious to to the people probably who have to take the decision. So probably there is a lack of capacity at multiple levels. And as you said, the ecosystem will require so many dimensions to be covered. So what is your take on the capacity and capability building? And do we even understand what does capacity and capability building mean?
Commander Das and boys and girls sitting here, you can see the difference between capacity building and the gap that is there between the Western countries and India. Is 2%, 5% on domestic shipping side compared to 35% to 40%. So we have to bridge the gap by 3 or 5 folds. At least we have to target to become 2 and 5% to 10 and 15%, if not 35 and 40%. So that's one gap closure that is required, and therefore policy must attack that gap closure. That is not happening either in NLP or in MV 2030 document. Thirdly, my fraternity is only at the most 10 lakhs strong. Every focus on this gap is to civil construction, not to suitable navigation, not to suitable technology, not to suitable vessel building. If you want transportation to happen, I must be allowed to have suitable vessels carrying 2,000 tons of cargo on Brahmaputra River. Therefore, a shipyard needs to come on the banks of Brahmaputra River. Shipyards and ship repairs need to come on the banks of Guwahati and Varanasi. Not a single one available today, or whatever was available is also gone into disrepute. No training establishment on Ganges, no training establishment on Guwahati, no training establishment in Khadakwasla Lake. I've been trying to put a boat in Khadakwasla and not been able to put a boat in Khadakwasla. So unless you see a little bit of water transport going and visible on chowpatis, you will not be able to achieve those goals. So capacity building, yes, let us want to bring the gap closure first. Between 2 to 5% to 35 to 40% is a gap closure that is required.
So you mentioned that you're trying to build containers in India, and the gap is too much, considering the Chinese production costs and our costs. So I just want to quote from what little I know about when the Americans built their capacity during the Second World War, when they were building Liberty-class ships and all, and rolling out ships every week. So unless we get assembly line kind of thing into this, we won't be able to get our costs down. We have to get the convergence of the whole industry there. Because if we can map the rivers and the barges which need to build and on the east coast or west coast or whatever, to get what they did with the electric buses. The government gave out contract tender for 5,000 buses, initial contract, and all the government agencies pooled in. They gave the highest bidder, Tata Motors, 2,500 trucks, and they told Mahindra, if you match this price, we'll give you 2,500. And the next order is 50,000 buses. And the next order will be 5 lakh buses. Same thing was done with LED bulbs. So if we can bring that kind of approach to shipping or barges or whatever, like the vessels which need, or containers, that's when we can get the cost down. Otherwise, how will we get the cost down? That's what my submission, sir. Yeah, so, what do you think about this, sir?
Yeah, so whatever things you have mentioned is are difficult technological things which we do not have. And to reduce it that way is going to be not so easy. I'll give an example. For the engineering drawings, for these two companies I am trying to help, Itarsi and Varanasi, IIT Delhi is asking 1 crore for engineering drawings. Without engineering drawings, the class will not give an approval. We have approached the class now, and the class have come down to 50 lakhs. So IIT is out now. So I am now thinking of going to one of the class for engineering drawings. And you have heard that somebody is making, or with Honorable Minister of Shipping, Mr. Mandviya, and his compatriots in Bhavnagar, thinking that re-rolled steel of Alang, shipbreaking yard, could be used to make containers. It is such a bad idea. It will not pass the muster for engineering drawings. You cannot make ISO container with re-rolled steel. But like I mentioned to him, Ganga Vilas is made a voyage because of Prime Minister. Container is being made in Bhavnagar because of Mr. Mandviya. Das and Subedar cannot do anything like this, or not allowed to do anything like this. Not allowed to bring in investor from doctor community, for example. So that's one. You mentioned about assembly line. Siemens is quoting couple of crores for assembly line plant for the Varanasi container project. The Chinese are making it themselves. None of the engineering companies that I have been in touch with, including Ghadge Patil, have been able to give me any solution to make assembly plant for the 8 feet by 20 feet. Yeah? So that kind, so everything is adding up and I'm $1,100 short per container. And yet, you see again what happened. These people have gone and given contract. The Bhavnagar people have given, because when you start a business, you need those first few days, first few months to run the show, to meet the common expenses. इनको क्या किया? 1,500 containers have been promised at $5,000 to Concord, which is already undergoing privatization, which means whoever takes up Concord will be taking 5,000 container contract together with it. And those containers are not ISO, they are ISO containers, but not capable of being shipped in the maritime sector. I do not know how this is going to work. There is no way to distinguish from far. Oh, ये तो जहाज में नहीं जाएगा, ये खाली ट्रेन में जाएगा. ऐसा कंटेनर बनाना मुश्किल है, ऐसा हो नहीं सकता है, unless you change the ISO specification from 8 to 8.5, for 20 to 20.5, then the whole ecosystem changes on.
See, I'm into logistics. I know. See, it's not possible because a container itself is a multimodal thing. It can go by road, rail, or truck.
Yes.
No, like so, road, rail, or sea. So it's the same container which goes. You can't distinguish, differentiate, nothing. It's not done anywhere in the world. So I don't know how we have come up with such ideas. You know.
So this is what is being done at Bhavnagar now. The APL company is doing this. And therefore, at every time it comes to port, ये container चलेगा, oh दूसरा. This is going to create a nonsense. It will be called Concord container or something. I don't know what it will be.
No, whatever it is. But I mean, that's not done in the world. I've been doing this business for last 30 years.
It's a very bad idea, just to please the Prime Minister and doing it something, rather than allowing Subedar also to make container in the right place. So, coming to your ecosystem and the difficulties that you mentioned, I'm therefore telling the government to give me some relief on the finance, and to give me some relief, little more relief, which they are giving 7 years of tax holiday, make it 15 years. I may go a little bit, beg, borrow and steal to bring down that $1,100 per unit difference.
Sorry, sir. It's becoming a... So, but no, I would suggest a totally different way, if at all. I mean, I don't know if you can work this out. I am not into this game. So, thing is, what is the total number of containers India buys from China? I mean, our shipping lines or whatever. Our
20,000 per year.
Right? Now, if that is the order per year, if that is made in India, right? If we can, and what over the next 5 years, 1 lakh containers. See, 1 lakh containers is a viable number now.
Yes.
Right? Now, what do you do to make 1 lakh containers? Vis-a-vis, what are the strategic reasons why we need to do it here? Because, see, during the pandemic, China was not giving us containers. We had a lot of problems. The fallout effect of not having containers, our freight rates went up, so many problems we had. So if something can be worked out pushed in a fashion like this, maybe these guys at the top might see some sense in it.
So in that the sense, one must realize that China was able to achieve this kind of thing on an export-led economy.
Yeah, we are not.
We are not. And to reach what you are saying is even further ahead. So our containers, 20 lakh, 1 lakh container में से 1.5 lakh container हमें कुछ ना कुछ बाहर भेजना पड़ेगा. That becomes a positioning cost.
बनाने का plant लगा है. या 5 lakh container का, then it becomes the Atmanirbhar Bharat, make for India, make for the world, something like that. Then only will it become viable.
Yes.
So, it's something like, I don't know, I mean, I'm just thinking loud, sir, sorry.
Yes. So there are difficult. I mean, nobody is
I know,
giving us all
I know. This is someone, you need some entrepreneur maybe who can,
No,
or maybe someone who can go reach the guys there in Delhi. Yeah.
We need blessing of Prime Minister to do to make it happen.
So you can get Mr. Adani on board, sir, maybe.
There's a question on the chat box. Yeah, so you said the UP is doing better in inland waterways than rest of the country. How are they doing that, and what is the difference?
Just because UP was at the forefront, starting in Varanasi, the terminal, the systems are relatively set up in Varanasi compared to the other parts of the waterways. Other than Kerala, I don't see any comparison between what is made available in Varanasi and nothing else at other places.
How is the protection of riverine biodiversity envisaged while waterways are being developed?
So biodiversity and protection of the rivers from that angle, one would need to see how the traffic develops, and as the traffic develops, there would be both community involvement and local pressures that would get adjusted into the transportation needs of that area.
But sir, I mean, all these World Bank projects have a separate budget for environment impact assessment. But do you think the EIA has been done in a comprehensive way, or is it been done in an inclusive way?
Condadas, environment impact assessment is generally a socio-political angle and depends the assessor and assessment time, assessment area, where sometimes one wins and then one has to appeal and solve that. But to not do it is not an answer for environment assessment. Be it the road works. I mean, so I could give you so many examples where EIA may have not happened or not done. For example, the Paud Fata to Valbharti tunnel project now is in the news today again, and it will happen. What happened to all the environment assessment and objection that was there to it? So trying to protect Ganges dolphins and not have inland water transport because some EIA or World Bank has said so is not a good idea according to me.
Sir, I mean, probably the person who asked the question wants to know that, I mean, finally, it is the contractor. I mean, in this case, I'm saying the government. When they conduct environment impact assessment, they have to take enough responsibility that it is done in a more comprehensive and inclusive manner. Otherwise, somebody can go to court later after half the work is done, and then it doesn't stand in the court. So that's a worry. I mean, if you have done it properly, of course, I mean, if there are justifiable reasons, the court will anyway give you relief, even if somebody goes to court. But sometimes it is felt that it has not been done seriously right at the beginning itself. I mean, at the time of approval itself, I mean, if you are not serious, then who else?
I again have to say, EI is a teamwork, and it all depends on the assessor and assessment time and assessment done. You can see what at the end of the day what happened. The dredging of NW1 got delayed by a couple of years because the report went and the NCLT put a stop to this. So where the dredge material was being pumped, where the dredge material was going, whether the economy of the locals was involved or included, was it inclusive enough, etc., etc. If all that had been taken, this is all what the Supreme Court said and allowed the dredging to continue. All I'm saying is make dredging equally happen for common benefit of the local community and the river depth, so that the river transportation, which has a greater good in the long run, and therefore EIA could be concluded to say that it is not affecting biodiversity.
I mean, I think it brings us to the point that, I mean, there is a requirement of national capacity and capability building across. I mean, the UDA supports sustainable development. So I think there's a lot more study to be done. We need to understand the ecosystem better. And this will help multiple sectors and multiple such mega projects. Dr. Swayamprabha Das, does it answer your question?
Does partially, but I'm just very interested to know that instead of having a very contiguous stretch of the river which is open, can there be certain pockets which are conserved on the rivers?
Madam, there could contiguous pockets could be reserved, but if it is coming in the way of a national waterway, then such a break will defeat the purpose. One would have to find more difficult ways of conserving or bypassing that place, but I doubt such a thing happens on national highways or state highways, which may also have such reservation areas, and much easier to detour such areas. But I take your point. If the EIA comes up with such pockets, and if it's come to my light, I would look into it. Thanks.
Yes, I think we need to have more. I think one of the challenges that we face in India is that there is very little data and there's very little understanding of the underwater or the water bodies. And for the policymakers also, it is quite difficult to take decisions based on some extrapolation of something from outside. Going to the next question, in NW2, the nearest industries are approximately 100 kilometers. Last mile connectivity is a killer. Any recognition that users should be brought closer to the water? That's a very important question.
Yeah, that is what is being tried by increasing the number of waterways, and Guwahati industrial area channels are being created so that the water is available much closer. What is not available compared to the mention of 100-kilometer industry is the suitable vessels or transshipment vessels, which would make Pandu viable for transportation. I would say not so much the distance to the industry, but suitable vessels available to that industry.
But I think this also probably highlights the fact that typically our industrial corridors have been not kind of aligned to waterways. I mean, as you also mentioned, it was more dependent on the road transport. So like now we are looking at this bullet train and the entire industrial corridor being built up, Bombay, Ahmedabad and various other places also. But I think inland waterways, although it should not be, but looks like a new concept. So there will be so much alignment across different sectors. It's a very valid point, but I think we need to look at it in a long term and kind of have a calibrated approach to make sure that everything is viable. The next question is similar issues in NW1. Captain Subedar may comment on this. So I think on NW1 also on the Gangas.
Yeah, the Ganga I mentioned, the issues are pontoon bridges, the low-hanging bridges, the connectivity to the Varanasi and other terminals, which is good, but not suitable. You can see the Varanasi terminal itself, built at a huge civil construction cost, could have been better utilized by floating jetties, pontoon jetties, Alaska cruise kind of 4x4 jetties. Where was the need of 5,400 crores spent on Varanasi terminal and 2 container stackers there doing nothing? These are all the wrong things that have happened, which are getting blamed for bad IWT. And there is move now to do better on the landing systems upriver. and downriver. The Allahabad terminal is going to be much better construed when the least available depth becomes better available there, 1.2 to 2.2 meters.
I think, yes, sir. Again, it will come back to the capacity building because people who are locally there for decision making probably they didn't have the right exposure and certain things got done. So, yeah, I think it's a continuous process. Capacity building cannot be done in one go. More and more people have to be aware. They have to be aware of the opportunities, and probably more and more people need to look at this as a career opportunity. And that's probably also the objective of this kind of a workshop for the young people to know where the opportunities are. I mean, you can imagine so much resources being allocated to this, but there's not enough takers on this. But as all of us believe, this is a direction which nobody can stop now. I mean, India has to, there is no other way but to look at water transport as a medium and whatever. I mean, it is not only people who are going to contribute to the inland water transport whole system itself, but there are so many other aspects. The industries will have to shift closer to the so many other sectors will get connected to it, and so again the whole ecosystem will have a different kind of shaping and alignment. So if there are no other questions,
invest in Subedar and boys and girls, and IWT will happen.
Certainly, sir, certainly. So, sir, thank you so much. We really appreciate a very frank, I mean, I must definitely admit, a very frank and bold presentation. And you have kind of called a spade a spade. So, I really appreciate, and my association with you is a long one, and I always look forward to looking at. And I'll also, before you leave the dais, I want a promise from you that at least put down something in writing for us. I mean, we have a UDA Digest platform. That aspect of the builders community being given responsibility for certain areas of dredging and connecting Manrega is, I think, a fantastic idea. We have been also looking at things in a particular, but if you can kindly put down that in a short article, we will be able to take it forward as a project by one of our fellows. I think Praful, you want.
I will do that.
One more thing we want to seek your help is in MRC we did a project of mapping the Khadakwasla, which provides the fresh water, drinking water to the city of Pune. And we did the whole soundscaping, the coring for it, everything has been done. We would like to reach out to, if you can help us, reach out to the local corporators or the municipal, the local, urban local body, because their water is coming from there. We just want to sensitize them, about what is possible with the Khadakwasla, and see, Nanded city has been built there, sir, recently. See, all that silt, all that sediments could have been utilized to build a city like that. And had Credai or Mr. Magar been on board or something like that, things would have been so much better for Pune. I mean, that's all. That's what I feel looking at, listening to you. So if you can help us reach out to these the urban local bodies, sir, we'll be very grateful, sir.
Sure. We will have a cup of tea with PMC Commissioner and Chirore in the next few days.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. So we'll break for lunch and then we'll come back. Welcome back. We'll start our next session now. Again, a very, very important dimension. Sustainability. We have talked about diplomacy. We have talked about traditional knowledge. We have talked about the inland water transport, the commercial aspect of it. And now we have a very, very important speaker, Dr. Neha Midha. She's joining us from the UNESCO office in Delhi. She heads the natural sciences there. They're driving the biosphere reserves. The cluster office in India also manages 5 other countries. So without taking much of time, I would request Dr. Neha to kindly take over. My request to you, ma'am, is to kindly first introduce yourself. We don't introduce a speaker. We request the speaker to please speak about themselves, what they would like the audience to know about themselves, their journey the organization that they represent, and something specific about their work. And then I'll request you to please start your presentation. Over to you, ma'am. Dr. Neha, welcome.
Hi, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody, once again. We have Dr. Neha Midha. She's joined us from UNESCO India at the Delhi office. Ma'am, in the MRC, we normally don't introduce the speaker. I will request you to kindly talk about yourself, your personal journey, whatever you would like us to share, and your professional journey, and also a little bit about your organization. And then you may kindly make your presentation. So we will request you to have your lecture for about 40 minutes, and then we get another 10-15 minutes of Q&A. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you. My name is Neha Midha. I work with the UNESCO New Delhi office, and my academic background is environment management, and I've done my post graduation in environment management from Forest Research Institute in Dehradun, and then that was followed by a PhD in natural resource management from Wildlife Institute of India. After that, I joined an international NGO called WWF India. I was there for 7 years. And after that, I joined UNESCO 5 years back. So that's my journey. I belong to Delhi. So for UNESCO, within the presentation, I have one slide where I will talk about what UNESCO does. So I'm going to share my presentation. So I've given my introduction, and for today's presentation is about an approach which talks about living in harmony with nature through UNESCO designated Biosphere Reserve sites. So a brief about UNESCO. UNESCO is United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization. It is a specialized agency within the broad UN system. It was established in 1945. India is one of the founding member of UNESCO. The headquarter is in Paris, and it has 53 field offices, and one of the field office is in New Delhi, which is mandated to work for 6 countries, including Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. So the mission of UNESCO is to build a culture of peace, and it does that through its different programs like education, programs like culture. One of the well-established program of UNESCO is its World Heritage Sites. I'm sure you all might have heard about World Heritage Sites. Other programs include working on social and human sciences, communication and information, and natural sciences. This is where I work within UNESCO New Delhi office. And within natural science, one of the well-established program is UNESCO Man and Biosphere program. Just a brief background about Man and Biosphere program. So whenever we talk about conservation of natural areas, conservation of biodiversity, rich area, there has always been two school of thoughts. So one school of thoughts states that these biodiversity rich areas should completely be isolated. There should not be any human activities in these biodiversity rich areas. It's generally called force and fence approach, stating that just isolate these biodiversity rich areas and there would be no human activities. There is another school of thought that has become more prominent now. It's called landscape approach, where it give due importance or due promotion to the people or the local communities which live within these biodiversity rich areas or close to these biodiversity rich areas. People who have always from generation have been living in these areas, has been dependent on these biodiversity rich areas for as for their source of income or for their cultural value. So this approach basically talks about landscape. It talks about that a particular area like a biodiversity rich area should not be looked in an isolation. It should be looked for its management on a landscape base. And this is what the approach of UNESCO Man and Biosphere program. So UNESCO established this program in 1970s. It's an intergovernmental program. That means India, being a member state, is a part of this program. So MAB or Man and Biosphere program, it promotes protection of biodiversity rich area ecosystem, but also give equal importance to people living close to this area, and it promotes different approaches of how to do that, how to balance conservation and also the development of that area. But those innovative approaches has to be socially and culturally appropriate for that area and sustainable for that, for the environment. So here I would like to share with you all
Uncle lives has just been selected by UNESCO as a designated biosphere reserve. Julie isn't too sure about that. What exactly is a UNESCO biosphere reserve? Is it something like an Indian reservation? And will they be putting a fence around it? Then she probably wouldn't be allowed to roam around the woods and fields anymore. And Uncle George might have to get rid of his tractor and use a carriage instead. Uncle George can put his niece's mind at rest. He explains that a biosphere reserve helps humans and the environment to get along better, and it does so without damaging the lovely landscape. It doesn't need fences, just well-balanced interaction between humans and nature. Uncle George has also discovered some advantages for himself, such as opportunities to make his farm even more profitable, and this in ways that benefit nature and the region. For Uncle George, not much has changed, and Julie can continue to explore the woods and fields. But something is different. Julie is curious to find out what. The Biosphere Reserve now offers lots of new activities. Julie and other visitors can explore the area with a ranger or follow adventure trails to learn exciting facts about animals and plants. Of course, the local hotels, restaurants and tradespeople benefit from the visitors, so any doubts among the population are quickly dispelled. Many are seeing the advantages and forming corporations so that they can also participate actively in the development of the Biosphere Reserve. Julie thinks biosphere reserves are great and is almost a bit envious of her uncle because he gets to work where other people spend their holidays. And because businesses can develop so well in biosphere reserves, she might find a job there herself one day. Why not visit a biosphere?
Yeah. So, so how does it actually work? So for every biosphere reserve, it is required that the entire area has to be divided into different zones, and each zone would have a different function. So once that area is decided, there are three zones. One is the core zone, which is surrounded by buffer zone and which would be surrounded by a transition zone. So core zone would be the area which is the highest biodiversity rich area. It would be a habitat of threatened species. So this would form a course zone, and which as per the country's law is legally protected area. uh, Now that core zone is surrounded by a buffer zone, which is again a part of the protected area, but where human activities would be allowed, but in a restrictive term. So that is has also been defined that what activities can be allowed in this buffer area, and this is where the people live in this buffer zone. Then buffer zone is again surrounded by a transition zone. Here also there is a prohibition on the human activity, but to a lesser level as compared to buffer zone. So uh, so what happens that the whenever so UNESCO has put in different criterias for an area to be defined as a biosphere reserve. So the process goes that whenever a country like India decide that they would like to nominate an area for UNESCO for a designation of UNESCO biosphere reserve site, all the criterias that has been put up by UNESCO has to be fulfilled. So few of the criteria I have noted down here is that particular area has to be a representative of a major biogeographic zone of that particular country. It has to represent the unique ecosystem of that country. Then it has, like I said, it has that country um, has to have that appropriate zoning for that particular area, which would be the core zone. What is the criteria for defining that core zone? What would be the buffer zone? What activities would be allowed, with activity would be prohibited? Now another important part of being designated as a biosphere reserve, that it is not just one department, mostly the forest department of the state, which decide everything, that what can happen in that area, what cannot. But the landscape approach, or what activities can take place, what activity cannot take place, has to be decided by a participatory approach. Basically means with the participation of all the stakeholders living or functioning in that area. So either so those would be the local communities, the local people, local NGOs, different departments like agriculture, irrigation, land use planning department. Everybody has to come together to give their perspective on how that area has to be managed. Uh, Once that organize and the country be ready to have put up that organization arrangement if they would like an area to be designated as a biosphere reserve. So once all the arrangement is done, then the country put in the nomination files to UNESCO. So each country is also required to have a national map committee. This national map committee put in this nomination file to map secretariat at Paris office. Then there is international governing body which look at its criteria. This governing body is made up comprises of the member countries only. India is still not part of the governing body. Then this governing body make recommendation that the area nominated by the country fulfills the criteria or not. Sometime it does, sometime it does not, and the nomination file is sent back to the national map committee of the country for revision and for resubmission next year. It's a long process. Sometimes takes 2 to 3 years for an area to be designated as a biosphere reserve. And once the governing body designate a area as biosphere reserve, it become a part of a world network of UNESCO designated biosphere reserve sites. It would be proudly be part of 738 biosphere reserves in 134 countries presently. Uh, India has been able to designate its 12 sites as biosphere reserves. So today, I will give you a brief idea of two biosphere reserve sites in India, as our concentration is on coastal areas. So I will talk about Gulf of Mannar, which is located in the state of Tamil Nadu. Uh, so Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve, hotspot of marine biodiversity, key habitats like coral reefs, seagrass bed, and mangroves, home to 4,000 marine flora and fauna, including sea turtle, whale, dolphin, endangered dugong. Here, again, I would like to show you a 2-minute um, video from Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve. It will give you an idea of how it looks.
Reserve in South and Southeast Asia, extending from Rameshwaram to Kanyakumari over an area of 10,500 square kilometers. The core area consists of 21 islands with mangrove, coral reef, and seagrass ecosystems and is home to a biological diversity of 4,223 species, including the dugong. The community directly depends on the reserve for their livelihood, mainly by means of fishing. The Tamil Nadu Forest Department has carried out coral and seagrass restoration projects. The Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve Trust provides vocational training, especially for women, to encourage alternate livelihood activities such as pickling and tailoring, and has created awareness to reduce fishing pressure, aiming towards protecting life below water.
மன்னார் வளைகுடாவை பற்றி சொல்வதற்கு நாங்கள் பெருமைப்படுகிறோம். வணக்கம்.
Yeah, like I said, you have seen in the video how it is a hotspot of marine diversity and the key habitat. You must have got glimpse of these key habitats, and you also must have got a glimpse of when we talk about conservation of these biodiversity rich area, how they are important at this juncture where we are talking about climate change, we are talking about deforestation, we are talking about how these areas are important. We also have to see that there are local population who are actually dependent on these biodiversity rich areas. For Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve, there are 110,000 families. I'm talking here about the families are dependent on Gulf of Mannar as their source of income, and out of these 110,000 families, 56,000 families are below poverty line. So these communities we are talking about when we talk about conservation of biodiversity rich areas. Different issues in Gulf of Mannar. It's a growing population, the issue that we all are aware of, increasing competition due to use of modern fishing gears. These are still traditional fishermen that are dependent on Gulf of Mannar for their fishing activities. And there is also a strata which has started using modern fishing gears, and these communities belonging to below poverty line uh, cannot compete with those modern fishing gear. Yeah, sorry for that. And also because of this fishing gear, there has also been an over exploitation of these important conservation areas because of different infrastructure development, different when there is also a school of thoughts that states that because of the climate change, because of other development, the catch has decreased in this area, and that has led to destructive fishing activities to get more catch, and which has also caused considerable damage to the coral reefs, again that impact the most to these local communities uh, 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 belonging to these areas. So here is how biosphere reserve play an important role. Uh, so when I mentioned about different zoning, every biosphere reserve is also required to have a management plan. So that management plan, when I talked about different participatory approaches, that how which activity would be allowed, which activity would not be allowed, is defined by a management plan. And this management plan is made by the forest department in consultation with all the important stakeholders of that areas. So management plan would define where would be the core area, where would be the buffer area, what are the challenges of that area, which activity would be allowed in a buffer area, what are the local communities those are living in these areas, what are their source of income, all that details, the finer detail is mentioned in a management plan of that area, and that is approved by state government. Then state government submit that plan to the center government, and based on this management plan, the center government release the funds to a biosphere reserve for its working arrangement. Um, Now, like I mentioned, that whenever a management plan is made and when the area get designated, it has to work as per the management plan. So one of the approaches is community-based resource management. So community based would be the activities that can be allowed has to be cleared or has to be approved by the community. So in Gulf of Mannar is one of the best examples where community based resource management has taken place. That local communities has themselves defined that what would be the prescribing limit for a fish harvest in that particular area. Can we leave that area for few months and then fish at different do fishing at different areas? There are locally managed marine areas also. Then they have delineated no fishing areas, leaving that important fish habitat. So in Gulf of Mannar, it's one of, like I said, one of the best example where community has taken its rights and has defined that what activities can be defined for management of Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve. Then another good example in Gulf of Mannar is the financial incentives. So there are different schemes that has been put forward by the government, by local NGOs and different banks for helping these local communities by giving them loan for purchasing their. What they do, they form different cooperatives. In the as a cooperatives, they would buy different nets, boats as a community, and how they can sustain as a communities. There are different good example from Gulf of Mannar. So when in the management plan, they have very clearly mentioned that they have been able to help close to more than 2,000 families for ensuring a sustainable livelihood. Another biosphere reserve that I would like to talk to you is Sundarban Biosphere Reserve, located in the West Bengal in India. So if you look at the map of Sundarban Biosphere Reserve, the dark area is the core zone, and which is surrounded by this light gray, which is the buffer zone, and then rest of the area here is the transition zone. So when I talk about this buffer zone, 3 million is the population which is living in this buffer zone and is dependent on this Sundarban Biosphere Reserve for their source of income, for their livelihood. So here also I would like to show you a film on Sundarban Biosphere Reserves to give you an idea.
Sundarbans is the world's largest remaining tectonically active deltaic mangrove forest. With an exceptional range of flora and fauna, it has the highest number of mangrove biodiversity globally. This is the only mangrove tigerland in the world. Measures taken by the management have been effective in controlling human-tiger conflict. Nylon net fences have been erected along the forest village interfaces. Quick response teams are stationed at strategic locations to manage tiger straying incidents. Regular interactions with fringe villagers have improved mass awareness in Sundarbans remarkably.
So Sundarban Biosphere Reserve present a different type of issue as compared to Gulf of Mannar Biosphere Reserve. So here, these local communities, these are traditional honey dwellers. So as their tradition, as their source of income, they go within the Sundarban Biosphere Reserve for a period. So the honey collection can be done only for a period of 3 months. So this Sundarban area's agriculture is not really very good because of the saline water. So these people are dependent on the forest for different product from the forest which they can sell in the local market and earn their livelihood. So one of the livelihood is the selling of honey. um, so these local communities, they go to Sundarbans, and within the Sundarban, and then they put the traditional way is to putting fire and then collecting honeys. uh, so the issue which is different, a little bit different in case of Sundarban, is when they go for collecting honey, it has become very popular that this honey is known as commonly known as blood honey, because of the tiger in the Sundarban area. It's a very common news that these traditional honey dwellers get killed by by the tiger in these areas. If you look at these two photographs, you would see that when they go inside the forest, they whenever a person is collecting the honey, other person is making noise to make sure that animals stay away. From them, there is another where they put in this mask behind their head, uh, a traditional way of thinking that the tiger will assume that the person is looking at at it directly and the tiger will not attack. These are traditional ways which they have been following for generation for saving themselves. But tiger attack has not stopped. It has increased because of the poverty in this area and the dependency of these people on the Sundarban forest. So biosphere reserve management comes in here to help these local communities. Now here also the villagers, they have formed different cooperatives, and what they have done is the forest department, based on the scientific studies, have identified the areas within the buffer zone of the Sundarban where they can put in apiary boxes, and they leave these apiary boxes within this fenced area within the buffer zone of Sundarban Biosphere Reserve. And the forest department or the Biosphere Reserve management, it provides the local communities with different gears which are required for safeguarding themselves when they go in to put in these apiary boxes. And so this has really helped the local communities to continue their source of income, but in a safe way, and they so that they don't follow different illegal ways to go inside these forest areas. And as an result, it has really increased the quantity of the honey that they can take out using these apiary boxes. And the forest department has also provided them different distillation or different for increasing the quality of that honey before they sell. Otherwise they used to sell in the local market. Now they have been provided with a better opportunity to sell these locally collected honey. So these are the example where forest department or the biosphere reserve management help these local communities. Those have been living close to this biodiversity rich area, which for a country, for every one of us, are important. But they are also source of income for these poverty ridden areas. To save these villages from the tiger attack, the areas are identified from where tiger enters. Nylon tents have been put up, these fencing, to avoid what we known as man-animal conflict. Uh, so the, so for a biosphere reserve, it's not the local idea only; it is also an international idea. So biosphere reserve also give a platform. Like I said, that every biosphere reserve is part of world network of biosphere reserve. So these are the innovative approaches that India showcase to other biosphere reserve. Now biosphere reserve in India, what they have not been able to do fully is it's like promoting that like the honey that has been obtained is obtained from the Sundarbans. So that's that kind of promotion, that kind of advertisement is still not being done in India, whereas in European countries they have been able to advertise these products, especially for selling. Uh, saying that how difficult it is for the local community to sell this area, and that's a part of their advertisement. Then Biosphere Reserve also have different youth network where they exchange again ideas within the youth from different countries, that how they live in that area, to share their experiences. Now, another, so those were the two coastal biosphere reserve. Just to give an example from another biosphere reserve is Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve. Uh, I will go very fast in this case. Again, core zone, buffer zone, transition zone. Uh, in case of Nanda Devi Biosphere Reserve in Uttarakhand, uh, it's a part of religious tourism. It's, again, I wanted to share that because it's another aspect from a biodiversity rich area. It's a part of religious tourism. The Badrinath, Hemkund Sahib are located within the buffer of the biosphere reserve. Now, Nanda Devi is an example, really good example, where they have been able to do community owned responsible tourism. It's where biosphere reserve management have trained the local youth to make sure that all the tourism uh, goes to the local communities. They have built capacities of different youth to carry out tourism, but a responsible tourism, to make sure that all the rules that has been put up by the forest department, by the state department, by the center, they are followed whenever there is whenever the tourists go to these areas. What would be the better systematic garbage management? All the direct sales of carpet, woolen product, they have to be one has to buy this product from the local communities also. So it's one of the good example from India, from community owned responsible tourism. Uh, so from these three examples, Biosphere Reserve is a site which helps to achieve, I believe, all the sustainable development goals, all the 17 sustainable goals. Either it talks about protection of land, water, poverty, and all the 17 sustainable goals are touched in one or other ways, including the goal number 17 on partnership, because that's what Biosphere Reserve is about the partnership. So that's it from my side. Looking forward to, if you have any questions, I would love to answer.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a very, very informative and encouraging presentation, I would say, because I think India is on a path of development, and losing sight of sustainability will be a disaster in the long run. Any questions, anybody? Just call your name before you ask the question, please.
Hello, ma'am. My name is Rishikesh Wag. Ma'am, I want, like you just highlighted, that there are not enough resources to what we can say, to advertise the forest produce of the people of Sundarbans. So can Vandhan Vikas Kendras of Government of India play a good role there? Or
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it depends upon the area, the state, which policies, which different approaches they would like to use for advertising the area. I mean, it depends upon how they would like to do it, or if they would like to do it or not, because it's a collaboration between local communities and any organization arrangement that can be done. It would depend upon site to site basis. It will be different for different sites. It will work somewhere, it will not work somewhere.
Great, ma'am. Ma'am, and there's a follow-up question. On World Biosphere Day, which was celebrated recently, I even attended the webinar where even MRC conducted
World Biosphere, International Biosphere Day.
Day for Biosphere, yes.
Biosphere Day. So, ma'am, at that time, like there was a proposal that there is a plan to establish biosphere reserves in central India. So, please, can I know what is the status? I'm just eager to know. That's all.
Yes. So India, I mean, it's not out. yet, but India, I believe, would nominate Khanna and Pench for Biosphere Reserve designation. But that nomination file is still under preparation, and it depends upon the India when they would like to submit those nomination file. Completely a prerogative of India National Biosphere Reserve or MAP committee. So it is based on Ministry of Environment and Forest.
And are the corridors included in it? The Khanna Pinch corridors?
I cannot tell you right now.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I think what comes out of your question is, I mean, the first question is that there's a lot of collaboration and interconnectivity that reserves, as Dr. Neha also mentioned, there are communities. And there are different other instruments in the government to take care of the community. I mean, rural development is one important area. Rural livelihood is another important area. And also, the local government or the local authorities, the state authorities, the national authorities, and a global organization like UNESCO. I mean, they have to all come together. I mean, the very fact that the Biosphere Reserve has been established itself shows that there has been collaboration. But, it has to evolve over a period of time. And a lot more work will have to be done, I'm sure. Tomorrow morning, we have a lecture by Professor Ajay Dandekar, who is the president of the Bharat Rural Livelihood Foundation. So they do work on rural livelihood. And I think we will also have some questions for him because this interconnectivity is a very, very important area. I mean, setting up a biosphere reserve itself, going through the whole process of getting it approved and everything is I think, a mammoth task. But it doesn't end after you have been able to establish. I mean, that's what I think I can make out from the presentation. So it will be a continuous process, and I think there's a lot more collaboration. Your final comments, Dr. Neha?
No, absolutely. I would just like to add that designating a biosphere reserve, that's just a beginning. When all the communities, the departments, when they come together and they decide that how they would like to manage an area, after that the journey starts. So it's like a 10-year, 15-year, 20 years journey that how they would like to achieve different targets that they have set as a state, as a country, for managing an area, which is important for us, for those local communities, for India as a country. That's it. Thank you.
So, ma'am, actually, I just also want to highlight that the whole core focus of this series of workshop has been institutionalizing the skilling ecosystem for achieving or realizing the SAGAR vision of the Honorable Prime Minister. I mean, the SAGAR vision is about two aspects, security and growth. So growth is a very important, and when we say growth, to ensure equitable growth, I think the communities cannot be left behind. And what we were discussing before your presentation is also the balance between people, economy, and nature. So, but as you said, I mean, it's a beginning now, and a lot more skilling is required because the communities have also, I mean, the opportunities can come and go. But if you are not ready to grab the opportunity, then, you still can't make good use of the opportunity. So both, I mean, when you say skilling or capacity building, it is required at multiple levels. At the policy making level, at the stakeholders level, at the practitioners level, at the community level. And all of them have to work in complete coordination. So I think it's an ongoing discussion. It's, I mean, for us, we are focusing on the underwater domain, the underwater framework, and which of course touches upon policy intervention, technology intervention, and capacity and capability building. So you have one last question? Yeah, quickly.
Hello, ma'am. Again, Rishikesh here. Ma'am, I want to ask that how the national laws go along with the biosphere reserves, because the current, like in news, the eco-sensitive zones and the new regulations are like quite in heat. So how these two things go together? I just want to know the national laws and the establishing of the biosphere reserves and the limitations or the opportunities, I would say.
Yeah, it's a very important question, I would say. Uh, so, I mean, from the answer from my side, from UNESCO. Uh, so from UNESCO, it does not, honestly, does not interfere with national law for a country. That's not our job. It's the country which decide that which law go where and how that law has to be used. Where UNESCO roles come in is when they put in the nomination file saying that these law would be used in this way, and when it goes to the governing body, and the governing body comprises of different countries and different stakeholders, and if they think that there could be an issue with this particular problem, with this particular law, if they think that local communities right have not been taken care of, then it goes again for the revision to ask the country that what about their recommendation, about their suggestion, that how they will take care of that. That's at the time of the nomination. And after, once the area get designated, then there is a review process. After every 5 years, after every 10 years, then again the country has to submit a review file that what the promises they have made in their management plan at the time of the nomination, it has been taken care of not. If again during the review process, UNESCO can ask a question again to the country that we believe that there is an issue with this law, uh, only a question, and if country does not give a satisfactory answer, the designation can be taken back. But UNESCO provides an approach, provides an international designation. It gives an platform to a country to showcase proudly its approaches toward balancing conservation and development. But UNESCO does not interfere within the national laws. It can absolutely, if a country ask for a help for international expertise in case of any particular issue or challenges, UNESCO provide those international assistance. But India, I believe, has reached a level that it does not. It's on different path of development. So that's my answer.
Thank you so much, ma'am. One last quick question. Is there any transboundary biosphere in South Asia? This has come from Dr. Swayam Prabha Das
Yeah,
online.
unfortunately, no. Only in the Central Asia we have a transboundary landscape between Kazakhstan and Russia. But unfortunately, not in South Asia. Sri Lanka and India, they have been talking quite like for the 3 to 4 years. They would like a transboundary biosphere reserve between Gulf of Mannar on this side and Sri Lanka area on that side. But it's still under discussion. India and Sri Lanka, both country has not come together. Yeah. Hi, Swan Prabha. How are you?
I'm good.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I think we'll end this session now because we have another thing. Dr. Neha, Midha, thank you so much. Really appreciate. We would have definitely loved you to have come to
Yes.
Pune and had a one-to-one interaction, but I think it still works online. I know you have a very tight schedule at this point of the year, but I really appreciate you joining us and representing UNESCO in this platform.
Thanks
Thank
for
you
the
so much.
opportunity. Thank you. Bye-bye.
So we'll take a 5-minute break, strictly 5 minutes, because we have a very, very important lecture starting. And if you want to take a break, and we'll assemble back because Ambassador Javed Ashraf will be joining us in the next session. Good morning, sir, as per your timing, and good afternoon to the audience in India. His Excellency, Shri Javed Ashraf, sir, thank you very much for joining us, sir. Sir, thank you very much for joining us. I would like to give you a brief on what this workshop is about. And so this is a series of 4 workshops that we are conducting. The main focus of this workshop is to develop an institutionalized skilling ecosystem for realizing the SAGAR vision of the Honorable Prime Minister, a new perspective based on the underwater domain awareness framework. As you would appreciate, sir, the SAGAR is about the water and the water bodies around us. And the underwater domain awareness framework is relevant to both the marine as well as the freshwater systems. India is blessed, as we know, and the SAGAR vision has been a remarkable apex level declaration where the true potential of India can be realized. That's what we strongly feel. So we at MRC has been working on the underwater domain awareness framework, and when we say framework, we have been working on the policy interventions, technology interventions, and the acoustic capacity and capability building. The larger UDA framework has five pillars. One is research, which is a multidisciplinary research because there are so many aspects or so many dimensions that need to be looked at. The second is the academic pillar because we are very, very conscious of our academic degrees. So there has to be, and it has to be part of the academic curriculum. So we are working towards that. We have got few courses approved by the AICT. We are working for many more. The third is the skilling. Now we are giving a lot of importance to skilling, not just for our own people, but also as a country, we want to export skilling. The fourth is an innovation ecosystem. So the startup ecosystem has been given a lot of support by the government. So how to encourage whole lot of innovations in this sector. And the last but not the least is the strategy center or the policy center. Because policy has to support a new initiative. So with these five pillars, we have been working on multiple aspects. But this particular workshop, we want to focus on the skilling part because that will touch a whole lot of the demographic advantage that we talk about. It will touch a larger section of that and at multiple levels. So in this series of workshop, the first one, last 4 days and also tomorrow, we have been looking at the policy intervention component where we started with the inaugural, where Ambassador Anup Mudgal sir was here with us for 3 days, your colleague. And today, sir was supposed to join, but he had to attend the funeral prayer for Ambassador Dasgupta. So he could not join. Otherwise, he was supposed to join us for this event. Then we had a professor from IIT Guwahati who touched upon the whole political and the economic dimension. And we had a professor on maritime history who focused more on the traditional knowledge and how, from a historical perspective, we need to take our lessons while we are looking at the future. And there were several other lectures that have been done, one on the Brahmaputra and the Indian water transport. Then we also had many of our research fellows talking about the various projects that we are undertaking in MRC, touching across the freshwater management to sustainable blue economy to even sediment transport and sediment management. And there'll be more presentation in the coming week. Tomorrow we have we also had representation from the UNESCO, both in India and Paris. Yesterday we had Vladimir Rubain from the Intergovernmental Ocean Commission to address the gathering. Tomorrow we have the Secretary Capacity Building Commission. Mr. Hemang Jani is joining us physically in Pune tomorrow. And we are also working under his guidance how to bring this into the larger policy framework. The next week is on technology, where we will be touching upon various components of technology, right from the digital ocean, which has to be supported by significant computational infrastructure. So right from high performance computing to quantum computing to metaverse to AI will be covered by the experts in the field and people who have been into the field for a long time. And also certain users and people from the industry will be joining us next week to look at the larger perspective. The third workshop is on the field interaction. We will be going physically to the coast. Malwan is a place north of Goa, where we will be interacting with the communities engaged in seaweed farming, aquaculture, underwater diving operations. Even there are representations from various NGOs and the researchers working on the field, looking at mangroves and various other aspects, and also interact with the local communities and how they are getting impacted. There are a lot of projects that we are doing on impacting the coastal community, and we will be also kind of presenting some of the work that we are doing and how it impacts there, and some local authorities also, including Marine Police and various other components. And then we come back to Pune, to our center. This particular series of workshop is being done jointly with our partners for skilling, that is Indo-Swiss Center of Excellence. They have a skilling center, and we have been given some space there, and we operate from there for our skilling program. And this whole workshop is supported by the H.T. Parekh Foundation. So this is the broad background, sir. And we would be trying to cover the larger dimension, right from the SAGAR vision to the present geopolitical and geostrategic realities and how they impact and how we see India going forward. So coming to today's the lecture right now, I would like to introduce our esteemed speaker. His Excellency Mr. Javed Ashraf assumed charge as the Ambassador of India to the Republic of France and the Principality of Monaco on July 13th, 2020. A career diplomat, His Excellency Mr. Javed Ashraf joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1991. He served in Frankfurt and Berlin from 1993 to 1999. He thereafter worked at the Americas Division of the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi from 1999 to 2004. He completed a 3-year tenure as a counselor at the Embassy of India in Kathmandu in 2007. From 2007 to 2010, he served as the counselor and the Minister of Political Affairs at the Embassy of India in Washington, D.C., following which he headed the Americas Division of the Ministry of External Affairs in New Delhi from 2010 to 2012. His Excellency Mr. Javed Ashraf subsequently served as the Joint Secretary in the Prime Minister's office under the former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh and then Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi. His responsibilities during his tenure at the Prime Minister's office included External Affairs, Defense, National Security Council, Atomic Energy and Space. He returned to again serve at the Ministry of External Affairs in January 2016 and was Joint Secretary, Special Projects. He served as the High Commissioner of India to the Republic of Singapore from November 2016 to July 2020. His Excellency Mr. Javed Ashraf studied economics at the St. Stephen's College in New Delhi and management at the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad. Ambassador Shri Javed Ashraf has published a coffee table book of his photographs, A Day in the Life of Kathmandu, dedicated to the victims of Nepal earthquake in April 2015. His interest in outdoor activities include tennis and trekking in the Himalayas. He is married to Dr. Ghazala Shahabuddin, an ecologist and conservation biologist. Sir, we normally don't introduce our speaker, and I would request you to kindly also share some of your personal journey and also your professional journey, something which you like our audience to know, because we have a lot of young students, faculty members. We have naval officers, people from the services, other allied services. We are recording this whole event. There are people online and there are people offline, but we are recording every session, which will be made available to our audience and members in future. So, sir, I hand over the mic to you, sir.
Thank you very much. That was a rather long and unnecessary introduction. But thank you. Good to see you online. Recall our meeting here just a few months ago. I'm very impressed with the work that your center is doing. It is an extremely vital subject for both our national security and for achieving Atmanirbharta or self-reliance in a critical domain of national security going forward. Now, I don't know what exactly you want me to speak on, but the topic that was, I think, sent to my office was the SAGAR and the vision and the global order. And I presume that in some sense, we use that as an anchor to drill down on what is really expected in the maritime domain from India and what we should be doing. So I think all of us would recall that the Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi, spoke in the port of Mauritius in Port Louis with the Indian destroyer and the Mauritian ship that we had built, Barracuda, as a backdrop. And what was really the first time that an Indian Prime Minister was really speaking exclusively on the issue of maritime security, particularly then in the context of Indian Ocean region. And there were 5 elements to it. And of course, if you recall, he had prefaced this by saying that while our attention since independence has been largely focused on our continental challenges, particularly because of the experiences of wars, but much of India's history has also been shaped by the oceans. And of course, currently it remains critical for our economic prosperity and for our security. The 5 elements that he outlined were: 1, that we will do everything to safeguard our islands and our coast, and also to protect our interests, and that we will build all our capabilities in order to achieve these objectives. But as part of this capability will also be available to our friends and to our neighbors in the Indian Ocean region, particularly in responding to humanitarian assistance or in conflicts or for people in distress, and something that India has been continually doing. The second element was that we will deepen our economic and security cooperation with our friends. And that would also include increasing their security capabilities as well as their economic strength. The third was that he felt that the region will be more secure and stable through a collective action, such as, for example, through the Indian Ocean Naval Symposium and other institutional structures that have come. So to bring the region into a cooperative framework for security. The fourth was to see that this region's peace, security, stability, prosperity hinges not merely on security cooperation, but a deeper sense of integration and cooperation, which would include economy, infrastructure, connectivity, science and technology, cooperation in marine ecology, and blue economy, or as you might call ocean economy. And that is something, for example, that one could pursue through an institution like IORA, the Indian Ocean Rim Association. And finally, and a very important element, the fifth, was that we will work with not just those in the region, but others who have a stake in the region, and which meant that for us, our vision was open, inclusive, and not something that we would say, as we see some of those arguing that Asia for Asians or a certain region belongs to a particular sphere of influence of a country. So this open, inclusive, and a cooperative vision was encapsulated in SAGAR, which was, of course, security and growth for all in the region. And this had a lot of resonance. The next time he spoke about it was when he outlined his vision for the Indo-Pacific region, which was the first time again that we were, as a government and as a country, outlining a vision for the Indo-Pacific. And that was when he delivered the keynote address at the Shangri-La Dialogue on June 1, was it May 31st, 2018, where he said he had spoken about this vision and extrapolated this to the Indo-Pacific region, where he spoke about essentially a region which is open, inclusive, and balanced, connected by secure seas, integrated by trade, anchored in international law, and led by ASEAN-led institutions. Again, the overriding vision was cooperation, collaboration, inclusion. Where does all of this, and so what was the significance? As I've said, one was that, we were suddenly now, after a long time, you had a prime minister and a government that was focusing on the maritime domain as we have not done for a long time. And that is a reflection of two things, or three really. One is that we recognize that in the emerging geopolitics, in the emerging world, maritime domain will have a vital bearing on our national security and economic prosperity, and for reasons that all of you know very well. The second is that the region, that is the Indo-Pacific region, and in particular the Indian Ocean region, will be at the center of gravity of the geopolitics, and that it will have a very profound influence on the evolution of the global order. And the third was that if India has to play a global role, and if India has to play its role in advancing both peace and security and stability in the Indo-Pacific region, but more broadly in terms of shaping the global order, then India will have to play a very, very prominent and an important role in the Indian Ocean region. Beyond that, of course, in the Indo-Pacific region. And I use the two in not interchangeably, because if you see the Indo-Pacific region, it's one strategic geography, but it has three distinct regions. And those three distinct regions are the Indian Ocean, where we will have to be a net security provider or a leader. And there is the bridge region of the Southeast Asia, where we will be a balancing factor. And then there is, of course, the Pacific, where we will be a reassuring factor and contribute there as well. But you can see that there are these three concentric circles of relative importance for us. And when you see the Indian Ocean region also, there are distinct sub-regions in it too. There is Southwest Indian Ocean region. There is the Eastern Seaboard of Africa. There is the Gulf. There is the Horn of Africa. There is Gulf region. There is South Asia, and then Southeast Asia, and of course, ending in Australia. This is the diversity of that region. And Prime Minister chose to spoke about it in Mauritius, not just because of our historical maritime links with Mauritius, but also the Southwest Indian Ocean region is in many ways also the gateway at the beginning of the vast Indo-Pacific region, and certainly of the Indian Ocean region, and will play a very important role, even though we often tend to think only in terms of Suez and the Gulfs, but this could well be another very critical area, especially in times of instability further up in the north. Now, why I say all this is because of, the importance of maritime security has increased for the following reasons, and our own maritime capabilities has become as never before. Now, Indian Ocean itself, I'd like to focus on more today, is a transit ocean. We all know the volume of trade and energy and commerce and container traffic and all of that it carries. We are aware of the choke points. We know that this is an ocean that connects the East and the West. So the Pacific and the Atlantic are in many ways closed spaces, but Indian Ocean is the one that acts as a bridge between two critically important geopolitical regions. The third, of course, is that there is a huge diversity. There are 40 countries that constitute the rim around the Indian Ocean region, with extraordinary diversity. If you think of culture, religions, political systems, if you think of levels of economic development. And why that is important is because when you have instability, when you have weak institutions on littoral states or in island territories, they're a recipe for deep concerns in maritime security, because they inevitably spill over, either whether it is in piracy or when countries compete for influence in those areas. Now, for us, of course, all of these things have existed before, but what presents a new challenge, of course, is the rise of China. And China's entry into the Indian Ocean, it is no longer confining itself to South China Sea. It is no longer just focused on the Pacific, but it has deep interest in the Indian Ocean region as well. And why is that so? One, it is important for its global ambitions. It cannot be a global power without having the ability to assure itself and secure its interests in the Indian Ocean region. The second, of course, is that it needs to also safeguard its energy and trade routes, which have led them through the Indian Ocean across. The third, of course, is that in the case of, say, a two-front war, where if there is a war in the Pacific or South China Sea, it would want to assure that its sea lanes of communication in the Indian Ocean region is, of course, protected, because that's the major source of energy. No matter what they do with Gwadar or what they do with the ports in Myanmar, those are going to be extremely, extremely difficult to do. So for us, and how has China, in a sense, presented positioning itself? We are all aware, of course, of its efforts to secure access and basing rights across the Indian Ocean region. The second is its increasing foray of submarines. It won't be very long before you might also see submarine aircraft carriers coming in. You certainly have, since the combined task force started for the counter-piracy operations, it has increased both the capacity, the endurance, as well as the reach of its maritime forces and its groups that come in. Then, of course, you see growing increasing intensity of fishing and fishing vessels, which are often sort of dual purpose coming into the Indian Ocean. They've also been in the Atlantic Ocean. They, of course, all over the Pacific Ocean. So when you look at all these series of challenges, and then you combine that with the fact that there are many countries which are in weak economic positions or have unstable political environment or have plurality of politics or have weak institutions, then they become challenges because they become vulnerable to influences and extraction of benefits for the geopolitical competition. Again, when you go to Southwest Indian Ocean region, you will see all of that playing out, in addition to the fact that there is a huge gas reserves, also hydrocarbon reserves, which will become potentially very important. Now, for all these reasons, and one of the biggest challenges we are going to face is growing, and this is something which Dr. Das started with, is growing capacity for the underwater domain as well, whether it is submarine capabilities, which is going to proliferate, or whether it is the underwater UVs, autonomous vessels, which will have greater endurance as they may get better batteries, they may have better sensors, they'll have better communication abilities. Underwater vessels that can go up to 6,000 meters, 3,000 meters, they'll be autonomous or remotely controlled. Then, of course, you have now from underwater, it goes to seabed, which are becoming new theaters of potential challenges, because seabed carries the submarine cables, which are the arteries of global commerce, global communication now. Billions of terabytes of data pass through it that are important for economies. There are resources. We are still, not yet clear on what happens with the rights to mine in the seabed. But there are also places where you can put sensors that can monitor underwater activities of military nature as well. So seabed is again becoming an important domain of competition. So wherever human beings take their activities, the competition and conflict also go over there. Now, from our point of view, if I just go back to the 5 elements and see what are we doing about it, I would say that, of course, we are building our capabilities, but we need to do much more of that. We need to have a very clear strategy and doctrine on what we do with, clearly under limited resources in terms of equipping our naval and maritime forces. What do we do in terms of maritime domain awareness, for example, or underwater domain awareness? What do we do in terms of our capabilities, subsurface, surface, and seabed? Those are areas that we will have to. And the debate isn't frankly very settled, and I can get into that question, which is all in the public domain, so I don't want to get into something deeper than that. But we are obviously very focused. We've seen the launch of an aircraft carrier. Hopefully it'll get equipped with state-of-the-art vessels. We've seen the launch of 6 Scorpion 6. One will come Scorpion submarines. We've upgraded our Russian submarines. There will be plans for new additions. We are building destroyers and frigates and shore patrol vessels and corvettes and landing dock ships, etc. All of that is growing despite the budgetary constraint. Now, to see what are your trade-offs? What do you invest in more and what do you focus more on? That's clearly a question of when you see the most effective strategy. But we are increasing, and that has also led us to the other element that we have been a frontline state in providing the first responder, whether it comes to vaccines, whether it comes to distress, whether it comes to humanitarian assistance, whether it comes to extracting people out of conflict, such as in Yemen. In every area we've been, or whether it is environmental disasters, such as in Mauritius, everywhere our Navy, our maritime forces, Coast Guard have been the first responder. And this is what Prime Minister spoke about. That helps build influence and trust in the region. No question about that. That's a very important. The second element is, of course, we are increasing our ability to have access to ports and infrastructure around the Indian Ocean region. I mean, there is absolutely excellent work that has been done in it, and we've made concrete progress, including with countries like France, which has a strong presence in La Réunion and Mayotte. And I was there, we just conducted, remember, excellent maritime surveillance exercises together with the French F-50 Falcon and our P-8I anti-submarine maritime surveillance aircraft. So we have, and we are looking across the entire region, from Southeast Asia through South Asia to Gulf to Africa to the islands in the Southwest Indian Ocean. So these are the two elements of capabilities: our military and assets. The third is our basing, and the third is, of course, the intelligence gathering, intelligence capabilities. Whether we are talking underwater domain awareness, whether we are talking maritime domain awareness, whether we are talking about information sharing, information fusion capacities. So that is a combination of what we do and what we do with others. The second element, of course, is building capacities for other countries, which we are doing. As I said, Barracuda was a way of signaling it. We're working with Sri Lanka, Maldives, Bangladesh. We're working with all the islands in the Southwest Indian Ocean region where we can provide capacity. We have institutionally, where apart from ions, there are other, which is a third element. We have now become part of every other instrument or institution in the region that deals with security. Indian Ocean Commission, we are observers. We are in Djibouti Code of Conduct. We are in the in RECAP. We are a partner in, of course, besides the Information Fusion Center in Gurgaon, with IMASO in Abu Dhabi, with Seychelles, the Regional Maritime Information Fusion Center in Madagascar, and the Regional Cooperation Center for Information in Seychelles, and further to the east with RECAP, we in Singapore, and the Information Fusion Center there, besides all the ASEAN mechanisms over there. So this is our regional. Fourth, of course, is IORA can do a little more, because it is not just important to focus on security, but to work more closely on the entire gamut of activities that are needed. And we are now realizing this. So we are working with EU, we are working with France, Japan, through Quad, through the I2U2, which is India, Israel, UAE, and the United States. So the different mechanisms through which we are trying, apart from what we are doing ourselves, through our development partnership, and by initiatives that we are launching with partner countries like France and UAE in the IORA, what we are also working with. So plurilateral and multilateral, trilateral formats have become an important addition to that element of a more integrated approach to sustainable development in the region, which has an impact on security, has an impact on our influence and our ability to shape the discourse in the Indian Ocean region. And finally, as I said, working with others in the region, and now that hardly bears mentioning, we have plurilateral arrangements with countries in the region. You're aware of it. If you look at India, Singapore, Thailand, if you look at La Perouse exercise, which is France plus Quad countries, we have the National Security Advisor-led maritime security cooperation involving the Sri Lanka, Maldives, Seychelles, Mauritius, etc. But we also work with Quad. We work with I2U2. We are now, of course, working with France in the trilateral format with UAE, and increasingly looking to work with countries in the Southeast Asia, including Philippines, Indonesia, Singapore, etc. So this is a kind of a strategy which involves diplomacy, economy, defense and security, science and technology, capability development, in order to position ourselves not just to secure our interests in the Indian Ocean region, but also to make sure that this region is stable, secure, open, and inclusive, and that where we avoid the kind of contestations we have seen in other parts of the world. And then finally, for us to help you shape the global order, in which, as I've said, the tides of the Indian Ocean will have a profound influence on the future direction of the Indo-Pacific region, but also of the global order. Now, if you ask me, what do we do, for example, with France? We do a number of things which cover everything. Let me just focus for the time being only on things that really critical for this session and for Dr. Das's and your research center's principal objective. We are working with them in every domain. So we work together in equipment, now not just for ourselves, but to see how we can support others in the region, which is going to be a critical factor of security, but also of influence. The second, of course, is that we exercise a lot together bilaterally with others in the region. Third is information and intelligence sharing. We have secure lines with which we work, and we work together institutionally in all the regional institutions, but also, as I said, in the trilateral format. In the terms of domain, we have excellent cooperation in the maritime security surface domain, as you're all aware of. We have working now more and more in maritime domain awareness. That's going to be very important in terms of using space-based assets, satellites, for getting a complete maritime domain picture, not just white shipping, but gray shipping and dark shipping as well. And for that, there are a number of things that we are doing. We're working together on underwater domain awareness, but also in terms of capabilities for securing the seabed. This is all part of our well-known plan. And in terms of also developing human and technological capabilities to be able to do that, because that's going to be a critical factor for us and for others in the region, whether we are able to have complete domain awareness starting from seabed all the way to space, including on cyber, because that's also now getting interlinked, and also whether we have the capability to respond to the threats and to be able to secure our interest. So with France, there is a very, very wide menu of cooperation. And in the coming years, you will see our ambitions will increase. We will not just be working on acquisitions, but also in joint developments, whether we are talking about space assets, underwater assets, or maritime assets, or in other domains of security. Simultaneously, we are also working with EU, which is a very important partner. And as EU becomes more engaged in the Indo-Pacific, and when EU becomes more active in certain areas of security, but they'll have a huge role to play if they can continue to focus on that region in non-security dimensions of security and stability, connectivity, infrastructure, economy, trade, maritime ecology, marine ecology, maritime resources, and so on and so forth. So this is, again, an area in which we work closely with France to guide and steer EU towards a more constructive, positive, more active engagement in the region. So let me stop here with these remarks and happy to take questions.
Thank you so much, sir, for a very, very comprehensive presentation. I'll use my trump card of being the organizer to ask the first question. I would like to ask 3 questions, sir, in a row, so that while you are answering, you are aware of the next question. Sir, in the recent Quad summit at Tokyo, there were 2 major declarations. One is data sharing with the entire region, and the second is the Indo-Pacific Economic Forum. Now, when we talk about the data sharing, many experts believe the whole mechanism of data sharing is through some of the major US entities who have developed the capability of gathering data. But the worry is more about the data analytics. Now, there are 8 data centers, as we are aware, including our own IMAX in Gurgaon.
Yeah.
Now, the operative term here is the data sharing for public good. When we say public good, it is more on the second component of the SAGAR, which is growth. I mean, strategic security is one, and I think the larger global powers have done enough, and most of it is probably in the classified domain, so we'll not talk about that. But when we say public good, are these 8 data centers, which are military driven, really capable of really understanding what is public good? So do you think there is a gap in terms of capacity building to connect? The second question I wanted to ask, in the sequences. Now, this entire the Indo-Pacific, let us concentrate more on the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific. Now, when we look at the Indo part of the Indo-Pacific, this area, you look at BIMSTEC, and the BIMSTEC itself has 25% of the global population. The demography is a major issue here, and the capacity building that is required if these people have to be part of the larger growth momentum or the growth engine. I think capacity building is a very, very important area. So now the government of India is definitely under the SAGAR vision or otherwise, the government of India is definitely taking the skilling and the capacity building, as you also mentioned, that it is not just for ourselves, but also, and also if under the SAGAR vision, if we have to be a leader in the region, capacity building support is the best tool or best weapon for us to reach out to our partners and be a leader in that sense. So your comments, sir.
So there were two questions. There were, I thought there were three, but okay.
Third one is on under the SAGAR vision. How does the capacity building initiative match up to the global requirement?
Okay, no, let me start with, you started by about data sharing and under that Quad Summit and IPEF. I think data, we have to distinguish first between, data as we see today in the digital world, right? So data, some people call it, it's a new oil, etc., and things. I think oil is a depleting resource, data is a multiplying resource. So every minute we are actually adding data. So you can say that it's going to be the principal resource for the future economy. Now, there is a lot of questions on who owns this data, where does it reside? Those are questions. What is consent architecture? What is cross-border flow of data? What is data localization? These are issues which are being discussed within the context of internet governance sets of issues, right? We have a very certain very strong views because we are a principal generator of data. But this data is essentially ends up residing in the United States on servers. But we have now started the data localization and process, and our own data bill will be soon there. That's one side. The second side is what we have been able to do, which is data for development. That is, we have a world-leading, innovative data empowerment and protection architecture, whereas we say that we are in a position to use techno-legal means to both protect the data, ensure privacy of the data, ensure ownership of the data by the individual who generates that data, but by enabling cross-application mobility of data in an anonymized form and using consent architecture, we are able to use data for development, inclusion, empowerment. Financial inclusion we are doing, entire direct benefit transfer, there are a whole lot of things. Now, this has all become part of now G20 discourse because India has led this. So when we talk of data sharing in the context of, Quad, etc., first, we must be clear that we are not, what are these kinds of data we are talking. When we talk of security domain, then we talk of security agencies, defense agencies being able to share data. One example of which is maritime domain awareness, right? So let us say that we have a certain capability on maritime domain awareness in US, Australia, Japan. A lot of this is linked to location. So you have satellites, you have AIS, you have ground-based radars, everything. You have ship-based radar. Now, you are not covering everything in one go. So what you're doing is you're sharing data. And then when you share data, you also have information fusion. Now, the other aspect of data analytics also implies that you have a data series that enables you that analytics. So if I start collecting data today, I would need to have a series of data on a time series basis in order for me to conduct those kinds of analytics. And you're familiar with that, whether it is image data or whether it is location data or whatever. You need that. Now, either we also work with some people and say, do you have access to, do you have a sort of, let's say, a repository of data for the last 20 years, and can we use it? And can we integrate it into our own system? That is possible. Then it gives you that every data that you collect now will enable you to. So I think these issues are being discussed, and as the challenges of maritime security in an Indo-Pacific region. But as you notice, I prefer to focus more on the Indo than the Pacific part of it. And much of my discourse was essentially on that, because let us not forget, when we say of Indo-Pacific as a strategic geography, our future and our fortunes are dependent on what happens in this Indian Ocean domain from Australia to the Southwest Indian Ocean region. And we should never lose sight of that. That's critical. So here we are ourselves developing capabilities, right? But as you said rightly, what does that capability entail? It entails assets. It entails ability to collect and analyze that data and to deploy it and to say, what are my response mechanisms for it? That requires, we will have to build a lot of skills, a lot of capacities around it. Now, in the technology domain also, we need to have the ability. For example, I mean, I went to Brest, which has the International Sea Tech Week. I was amazed to see even small companies here, small research laboratories here, the kind of work they have done on underwater domain awareness. So at the very least, you should be able to have submersibles that can go 3,000 meters, 6,000 meters, collect data, transmit data all the way up. You should be either put them on automatic mode, or you should be able to put them on remote control mode. You should be able to move them, not just leave. And I'm seeing all of that happen, but it requires a backup of R&D, but it also requires skilling. I mean, and I differentiate between the two, between those who operate it, sitting in front of the computer, and those who help develop and design those systems. Yes, I think we need to focus on a lot on that. And it can't just be in DRDO, or it can't just be in the PSUs. I think we have seen the history of our experience. That I know I'm speaking on record, but I think we have to put together our entire national capacities. India's capacities cannot be limited to one sector, public sector or private sector. It has to be a totality. And which is where institutions like yours have a huge role to play. And you know, I'm glad you are focused on one very specific area rather than have this massive menu of things to do, which then makes you capable of nothing, actually, in a deep sense. So I'm glad you're doing that. And when I speak of that data sharing, etc., it also segues into, so in the defense domain, you will need to build that level of trust and compatibility. Because these are technologies and these are capabilities people don't share easily. Right? So one, of course, that level of trust, we have that with France where we can rely on them. We are developing that with the United States to a large extent. But we need to have that capacity develop ourselves as well. So we are not perpetually walking on crutches. It needs to have that. And so which is why that is so important, whether we talk of space-based or whether water-based, underwater-based or ground-based. Now you come to IPEF. Now IPEF is a new kind of a framework. I mean, I'm no longer part of that. I've dealt a lot with the Americas, but it's a very interesting framework, because we must understand that the competition and the global order will not just be shaped by the security capabilities, but by your ability to give countries options and choices, enable them to make sovereign choices, to be able to stand for the international law, international order, and not be subject to the vulnerabilities of one hegemon, or to be torn between, great power rivalries. Now, so IPEF plays, or any kind of trade or any kind of economic connectivity, infrastructure, etc., plays a very big role. You've seen how BRI has been used also effectively. Now, IPEF is something new. It's beyond FTAs. It is because FTAs have a limited role. We are talking about complementarities and resilience. How do you build a new standards of economic engagement that is not just reliant on tariffs and things like that, but it is about, we saw that during COVID. We see that today in geopolitics, that resilient supply chains, diversified supply chains that do not make you vulnerable to concentration risks in one country are very, very important, both for shocks as well as for the evolution of geopolitics. So this is where IPEF has an extremely important role, besides the fact that it also addresses question of sustainability and things. So when you look at the global order, it is a combination of security and economic and other factors, which must be all given their due weightage in this. You can have the biggest, you can project military power as much as you want, but if a country is extremely reliant on one specific country, or if its debt or if its investment and trade is linked to one country, it's not going to share your military power. Its tendencies will be to focus also on the economic dimension, which is what IPEF does. Now, and that was the last part. You're right. I mean, absolutely. Please understand that for us, skilling is a very important part of our diplomacy. Now, you can decide which areas we do skilling in. You know that in Africa, in 2015, when Prime Minister hosted the Africa Summit in October 2015, following that, we had announced a $10 billion assistance package. But there was also, if I recall correctly, 50,000 scholarships for training and skilling, and we're using that quite well. We're doing that also in Southeast Asia. We do that in Maldives, we do that in Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and all of these countries. Now, which are the areas we should scale? So you're absolutely right. We do have training programs, for example, in the maritime domain. But together with our broad maritime strategy in the region, we must not just be able to provide security or to provide assets, but also build capabilities in these countries. For example, in EEZ surveillance. For example, in coastal security. For example, in managing marine resources or in the ocean health. If there is a oil spill, do I build capacities in those countries to be able to immediately respond, or do I have to wait for a ship to traverse, ocean over 4 days to be able to do that? Maritime patrol is something which every country needs. Research and development in things like marine biology, marine ecology, maritime safety. I mean, these are all really building blocks, but gives countries sovereign capacities. If you are able to teach a country how to do EEZ surveillance or even do EEZ mapping, they will discover a sense of sovereignty. So this should all be part and is a part of our strategy. We need to give it a much higher level of priority. And I think institutions like yours can play a big role.
Thank you so much, sir. Okay, I think, sir, thank you so much.
Pleasure. Thank you.
It's been indeed a pleasure and an honor to hear from you, and we will continue our engagement with you, sir. You'll be happy to know that in 2019, our company Neerdhwani Technologies won the Narwal Challenge. And we were invited to Brest, and we spent 10 days there interacting with the various industries there and various innovative centers there and looking at their capabilities. So thank you so much, sir. So we will end the day today, not just the session, because there is another meeting in this hall. And thank you very much. Tomorrow is a very important day. We will have lectures in the morning, and then afternoon we have interaction with Mr. Hemang Jani, who is the Secretary of the Capacity Building Commission under the Prime Minister's office. He is himself traveling to Pune for this event. I think exclusively for this event. So we are very, very honored. He'll be here with his team. And so I'll request all of you to be on time tomorrow. We start at 9:30. There are some interesting lectures in the day, and then afternoon we'll have this interaction. Thank you so much.